Chapter 6:24. If I were you, I would leave a little bit of the antidote so that I won't make any more mistakes. Dean looked at him and said indifferently. Richelieu sobered up a little when he heard Dean's words, but the comfortable feeling of inhaling the antidote made him reluctant to stop. He inhaled again and gently exhaled. At this moment, he was proficient in expelling the excess smoke. He didn't choke to tears anymore. After exhaling, his whole body was so comfortable that he couldn't help but want to take another sip. He pinched the burning paper with his fingers, but there was still a faint smoke floating out. Looking at the smoke drifting away, he had a feeling of pity. He spat a few mouthfuls of saliva on it to completely extinguish the fire. Then he put it back into his robe pocket as if nothing had happened. Dean saw his little action and felt pity, but he didn't show it. He said, "It's getting late. You should rest first. I'll send someone to call you at 7 o'clock. You can sleep in my study room." Richelieu nodded. "I know." Dean immediately got up and left with Aisha. Richelieu was relieved after Dean left. He felt that he was a bit sad. His life was in the hands of others. He had no choice but to live in fear. He had lived a glorious life for most of his life, but he didn't expect that he would end up like this in his later years. He sighed and turned to sit on the chair that Dean had previously sat on. He looked up and scanned the study room. He didn't see anything strange. Dean let him sleep here because there was nothing valuable in the room or was hiding his secrets. He slowly retracted his gaze and was ready to lie down on the bed. Although he didn't plan to sleep, he still had to pretend that he had slept so as not to arouse Dean's suspicion. He was just about to get up when his toes touched something. He looked down and saw that it was a small metal bottle. It was exactly the same as the one that Dean had given him before. He was startled for a moment, and his eyes lit up. He was about to pick it up when he suddenly thought of something. He looked up at the door and heard Dean's footsteps going downstairs. He was relieved and immediately bent down to pick up the small metal bottle. He opened it and saw that the antidote was exactly the same as before. "Is it a test? Or did you accidentally drop it?" His heart was anxious, but he quickly thought of something. "I'll keep it first. If he's testing me and asked me, then I'll give it to him. If he doesn't, then it means that he really dropped it." Thinking of this, he immediately put the small metal bottle into his robe, then turned to the bed, lifted the quilt, and lay down. He leaned against the bed and fell into deep thought. Dadian came to the hall and said to Nicholas, "Tell Sergei to bring the two women." Nicholas nodded and immediately went upstairs. A moment later, Sarah, and Sergei came downstairs together. The two women's hands were tied. Their hair was messy. Their clothes were torn, revealing their white bodies. There were many red marks on their shoulders. There were still tears on their faces. But at this moment, there was only hatred and resentment on their faces. They stared at Dean. "You hate me, but you can't kill me. Are you very angry?" Dadian looked at the two women. Sarah screamed and raised her hand to attack Dadian. However, Sergei held her down and slapped her face. She fell to the ground. Her messy hair covered her cheeks. "Since when did you not know how to show mercy to the fair sex?" Dadian looked at Sergei. Sergei replied, "Master, didn't you tell me not to be polite to them? I'm not like this to other girls. I love women very much." Dadian handed him 2 syringes. There was a light green liquid inside. "Give them the antidote." Sergei curiously looked at the 2 syringes. He wanted to ask, but he saw Dadian's cold face. He held back his questions and took the syringes in front of the 2 women. "Dadian, you bastard!" Sarah screamed in anger. "I won't let you go even if I die. If you are a man, then kill me." Sergei pinched her throat and kicked Lisa's chest. Lisa was sent flying to the side. Sergei looked at Dadian. "Is it all right to fight our way in?" Sarah was like a chicken. Sergei looked at Dadian. "Is it all right?" Dadian rolled his eyes. "Of course it will be in the blood vessels." Sergei let out an "oh" sound and showed a malicious smile to Sarah. He stretched out his tongue and licked her shoulder. After seeing the blood vessels, he immediately inserted the syringe and slowly injected the light green liquid into her body. After the injection, he threw Sarah to the side and injected Lisa, who was trying to struggle with the injection. Dadian didn't inject the chemical addictive drugs that he had developed using the decomposition equipment for the 2 women. Through Richelieu's reaction, he found that the chemical addictive drugs were not as effective as the mulberry leaf. Give them a tube of this every day. Dudeen threw 2 small metal bottles to Sergei. There are a lot of them in the basement. Go and get them yourself. Dudeen explained how to use the bottles. Sergei couldn't help but be curious. Master, what is this? Dudeen frowned as he saw Sergei's curious look. Let's call this thing cigarette. I want to remind you that it is best not to touch it. Even though this familiar name was used, this thing was completely different from the olden era cigarettes. Cigarette. Sergei looked at the small bottle in his hand. He was curious, but he knew that the thing that Dudeen gave to the 2 women was definitely not a good thing. Dudeen didn't say anything but waved. You can leave. A few of them nodded and left. Dudeen and Nicholas were the only ones left in the empty hall. Dudeen said, You should also rest. Nicholas smiled. Master, I'm a butler. How can I rest when you haven't rested? Dudeen waved his hand. Let me be alone. Seeing the weariness on his face, Nicholas's eyes flashed, nodding, I know. Finished speaking, he bowed his head and turned to leave. Dean rubbed his temples after he left. He raised his hand and pulled Aisha to sit next to him. He held her cold hands. He felt a trace of warmth in his heart. Wait for me. I'll be able to avenge us soon. Aisha was indifferent and didn't speak. Chapter 625. The first rays of dawn shone on the clock tower of Martha Square. The soldiers on duty who had stayed up all night bathed in the morning light. Their bodies, which had been infected by the cold, slowly recovered some warmth and vitality. They sighed in relief, thinking that in another hour, it would be 7 o'clock when the shift would be over. At this time, the sound of hooves could be heard. A dozen knights clad in bright silver armor galloped over from the street outside the square. They rode all the way to the bell tower. A middle-aged knight at the front reined in the reins of his horse and said, Soldiers on duty, listen up. The Pope will hold a prayer ceremony here in an hour. Sound the bell to inform everyone. The soldiers on duty were startled, but then they became happy and excited. They didn't expect the Pope to come here in person. This meant that they would be able to see this great man up close. This was an honor. Dong, 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 the melodious prayer bell rang. Unlike the normal morning bell, the prayer bell needed to be rung 18 times in a row. The ringing of the bell came from outside the square, and the nearby residents immediately woke up from their sleep. Hearing the continuous ringing of the bell, some of the older people did not count them one by one. Judging from the duration of the ringing of the bell, they immediately woke up their wives and children and prepared to go to the square early to grab a good position in the front. The prayer ceremony was different from the prayer festival. The prayer ceremony could be held at any time, but only the elders of the Radiant Church were qualified to hold it. It was usually held during the black snow season and when there were frequent rains. It was to pray to the heavens and the gods to prevent plagues and disasters. For ordinary people, being able to benefit from the prayer ceremony was something they couldn't ask for more. As the bell rang, the Knights of the Radiant Church used carriages to drag wood and shelves to the square to build the prayer altar. These wood and shelves were all finished products and only needed to be assembled. As time passed, more and more people gathered in the square. In the blink of an eye, the square was filled with people. Lord Bishop, it's almost time. A young Grand Knight with a gold star on his shoulder said with his head bowed. His eyes swept across the sea of people below the altar and said in a low voice, Wait a little longer. The Pope has always been punctual. Yes. The young Grand Knight nodded respectfully. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside the square, followed by excited exclamations. Hearing the commotion, Elnarin immediately looked over and heaved a sigh of relief. He saw an elderly figure dressed in a luxurious golden robe slowly walking over, holding an ancient vine scepter that symbolized authority and honor. It was Pope Richelieu. Behind him, there were 2 Knights of Light. One of them had a head full of elegant blonde hair and was obviously of noble birth. The other one, on the other hand, had black hair, was about 30 years old, and had a mediocre appearance. The Knights of Light stationed outside the square immediately stepped forward to protect the Pope. The crowd looked at the Pope in awe especially those who were closest to him. They were so excited that they wanted to jump up and down on the spot, but they did not have the slightest thought of rushing over to hug him. The majesty brought by the robe and the scepter made people not dare to blaspheme him. It's actually the Pope. The one holding the prayer ceremony is the Pope. My God, I saw the Pope. The Pope is too benevolent. He actually came to preside over the blessing ceremony himself. Excited cries could be heard from the crowd. As the crowd parted, Richelieu led his 2 attendants to the altar. Greetings, Pope. Elnarin immediately bowed respectfully. The young Grand Knight beside him also bowed respectfully. Looking at his most trusted confidant, Richelieu nodded slightly and said, "How much longer?" Elnarin replied respectfully, "Pope, there are still 5 minutes left. Looks like I'm not late." Richelieu smiled slightly. "Is everything prepared? The prayers and the holy book. Everything is prepared." Elnarin's face was full of respect. He raised his head and glanced at Richelieu. His gaze quickly scanned the latter's body, but he did not see any signs of injury. He heaved a sigh of relief and said softly, "Pope, I have already seen the handwritten decree you left behind. I wonder, we'll talk about this later." Richelieu raised his hand and interrupted him. Elnarin reacted and immediately nodded. He raised his head and straightened his back. He looked at the square in front of him and waited for the countdown. 5 minutes was neither long nor short. In the process of waiting, Elnarin suddenly noticed the 2 knights of radiance beside the Pope. Their faces seemed a little unfamiliar, and there was even a black-haired man among them. That kind of hair color usually indicated that he was a slave or a commoner. He did not expect that he would be able to blend in with Richelieu. He looked at them for a while, but did not see anything strange. He moved his eyes to the bell tower next to him. The huge mechanical clock hanging on the bell tower slowly counted down. Finally, it was 7 o'clock. The bell rang, and the blessing ceremony officially began. Richelieu received the blessings and holy book from Elnarin. With a solemn expression, he began to read out the solemn opening speech, followed by the blessings. The blessings were not just a few simple sentences, but an extremely long prayer taken from the Bible. Dean stood behind Richelieu and silently looked at the square in front of him. When the prayers were finished, everyone entered the prayer stage with Richelieu. They put their hands together and had a pious expression. Half an hour later, the blessing ceremony finally ended. Richelieu looked at Elnarin. "Tell the others to disperse. Come with me." "Yes." Elnarin noticed the change in Dean's expression and solemnly replied. Richelieu took Elnarin to a nearby tavern. He ordered several knights to clean up the tavern and stand guard outside. Then he brought Elnarin, Dean, and Noyce into the tavern. Elnarin frowned as he saw the 2 attendants come in. "You 2 go out first. I have something to discuss with the Pope." Richelieu waved his hand. "It's all right. They are trustworthy." Elnarin was slightly startled, and he couldn't help but look at the 2 knights. Richelieu coughed softly and said coldly, "Someone in the church wanted to assassinate me. Fortunately, they did not succeed. However, as we do not know who the mastermind is, I cannot return to the church. So, for the time being, you will be in charge of all the matters in the church." Elnarin eagerly asked, "Are you really okay?" Richelieu shook his head. "It's not a big deal." Elnarin said, "The Holy Church is the safest place. Wouldn't it be more dangerous if you were outside? I'll send more people to protect you. Let the King of Light personally protect you." Richelieu waved his hand. "I don't know if the assassin is related to the King of Light or not." Elnarin was stunned, momentarily speechless. He suddenly felt a chill. Clenching his fists, he gritted his teeth and said, "If I get my hands on that person, I'll definitely teach him a lesson." Richelieu patted his shoulder. "If you have the opportunity, then help me pay attention." "I will." Elnarin looked solemn. He suddenly thought of something. "I'll send a few of my confidants to protect you. Otherwise, if you're outside, no need. They are enough to protect me." Richelieu waved his hand. Elnarin could not help but look at the 2 attendants again. His eyes were filled with a hint of solemnity and jealousy. He knew that Richelieu did not completely trust him, but he trusted the 2 of them completely. Otherwise, he would not have handed himself over to them for protection at this critical juncture. "I'm leaving. You have to protect yourself," Richelieu said in a profound tone. Elnarin felt that Richelieu wanted to tell him something. He thought that Richelieu wanted to remind him not to get assassinated by the culprit. Richelieu took off his gorgeous robe and took a simple coat from Dean. He put on a hood to cover his face and turned to leave the pub. He took Dean and Noyce along the street. They went around 7 or 8 streets and turned to the suburbs before returning to the castle by the Mosa River. "How was it? Did I perform well?" Richelieu took off his hood after entering the castle. He turned to Dudeen. "I've told you everything you wanted me to say." Dudeen indifferently said, "Not bad." She didn't pay attention to him as she quickly jumped up the stairs and came to her room. Her heart settled down when she saw Aisha sitting on the bed. He took Aisha's hand and left the room. They went back to the hall. Richelieu asked, "What are you going to do next? Do you have eyes and ears in the dark church?" Dudeen looked at him. Richelieu was startled. There was a trace of hesitation in his heart, but he thought that he had to provide some eyes and ears to gain Dean's trust. There are 2 of them. One is an elder of the 9th region. I sent him to the dark church. The other one is a subordinate of the Sword King. His name is Riley. He used to be the most outstanding genius swordsman of the Holy Church. Dean's eyes slightly moved as he glanced at him. "You are willing to send the best one to be a spy." Chapter 6:26. It should be because he is too outstanding and you are worried that you can't control him. Dudien's face was indifferent, but there was a deep meaning in his words. It's a good thing that the weapon is sharp. But if you are worried that you can't control it and try to destroy it to avoid being used by others, then it's sad and incompetent. What do you think? You are right. I didn't think that you would know more than me at such a young age. Richelieu modestly smiled and took the opportunity to compliment Dean. Anyway, compliments were free and would bring benefits to oneself, whether the other party was a friend or an enemy. Dudeen frowned as he saw Richelieu's humble attitude. He took out a small iron bottle from his pocket. "This is sleeping medicine. I'm going out for a while. Take the medicine and have a good rest here. Wait for me to come back." Richelieu looked at the small black iron bottle in Dudien's hand and reluctantly smiled. "I'm completely loyal to you. I will never betray you. Moreover, we are standing on the same boat. If I betray you, then it's tantamount to a dead end. I can't go back to the monastery. If you're worried, then you can send someone to monitor me. No one here is stronger than you." Dudeen indifferently said, "You are right. If you're really a smart person, then you shouldn't betray me, because you will die. But I can't bet my life on someone who I don't even know if he's really smart or really stupid. Do you understand?" Richelieu was speechless. "Well, I'll eat." Dudeen took the small iron bottle and unscrewed it. He poured out 2 black pills. The pills exuded a strange fragrance. He looked at them and threw them into his mouth. "Not enough," Dudeen said. "Although this is made by a great potion master, and only one of them can make a senior hunter faint. But your physique is much higher, so you don't have to be polite with this bottle." Richelieu's mouth slightly twitched as he saw Dudien's eyes. He knew that it was useless to say more. He immediately poured the whole bottle into his mouth and slowly swallowed. At the same time, he hid some of the pills in his mouth. He hoped that the part he swallowed wouldn't make him fall asleep. Very quickly, drowsiness crept over him. Richelieu sighed in his heart and pretended to be extremely tired. He turned around and walked to the sofa. With a tilt of his body, he collapsed onto the sofa. Very quickly, he began to snore softly. "That's fast," Nicotine exclaimed beside him. Dean glanced at Richelieu's feet and indifferently said, "I'm pretending to be asleep. Go and get the things from my basement." Pretending to be asleep? He turned around and saw Richelieu's body lying on the sofa. Although he was fast asleep, but his posture was very close to the sofa. His feet were very close to the sofa. How could a person who was tired to the point of falling down think about his sleeping posture? Thinking of this, he looked at Richelieu, who was still pretending to be asleep on the sofa, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He did not expect the great Pope to have such an embarrassing moment. At the same time, he admired Dean. If it was him, He would never be able to see that the Pope was pretending to be asleep. He didn't even think that such a legendary figure would be able to pretend to be asleep. "What are you doing?" Dean frowned. Nicotine quickly replied, "Yes." He quickly walked to the basement and came back with a few syringes in his hand. Dean grabbed one of the syringes. There was a light green liquid inside. It was the liquid form of mulberry leaves. This liquid form was different from the cigarettes that were made from hay. First of all, it was fast and effective. It was directly injected into the blood. Unless the person had magic marks that could control the blood, it would be difficult to get rid of the mulberry leaves in the blood. However, the cigarettes made from hay needed to be inhaled in order to accumulate a certain amount in the blood. The effect was slow, but the advantage was that it was fast and convenient to make. Moreover, the residue of the liquid form could be disposed without waste. For people who were already addicted, the effect of the cigarettes made from hay was better. It was like a bomb primer that could directly detonate the strong desire in their blood. Dean grabbed Richelieu's arm and pinched it. Soon he saw the protruding meridians. He aimed at the meridians and injected it into the meridians. It depends on your performance whether you are pretending to be asleep or not. Richelieu was shocked when he heard Dean say, "pretending to be asleep." At the moment, he peeked at the thing that Dean injected into him. His heart turned cold. He didn't expect this kid to be so hateful and capricious. Soon, the unbearable but pleasant itch slowly climbed out of his body. This time it was more intense than the last time. It spread from internal organs to the whole body. It seemed that all parts of his body were being bitten by countless insects. It was unbearable. He tried to endure, but his body was trembling uncontrollably. He knew that he could no longer hide it. He simply sat up and kept scratching his arms and neck. He begged Dean, "I was wrong. Please give me the antidote. I know I was wrong. You are really not smart." Dean shook his head slightly. Richelieu didn't care about Dean's ridicule. He wanted to peel off his skin. His eyes were red as he pulled Dean's arm. "Please give me the antidote. I beg you. If you are willing to kneel down and show complete surrender, then I can consider it." Dean indifferently said. Nicholas' eyelids twitched as he heard Dean's words. "Pope, kneel down." Richelieu's body stiffened as he looked up at Dean in disbelief. However, he saw that the teenager's expression was as cold and indifferent as ice. His heart was filled with anger. He released Dean's hand, lowered his head, and gritted his teeth. Time ticked by. Richelieu felt that the itch was getting stronger and stronger. On the contrary, the previous strong humiliation and anger were getting weaker and weaker. In the end, only the itch was left in his mind. He couldn't help but reach out and scratch his body again. His nails soon broke his skin, but he didn't feel any pain. Instead, he felt a comfortable feeling. He kept scratching. Very quickly, he felt something wet and sticky on his fingers. When he looked down, he was shocked to see that his arm was covered in bloody scars. Some places had been scratched very deeply and were badly mangled. However, he didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. "I will scratch myself to death if I continue like this." He immediately stopped, but the itch was getting stronger. It was as if his whole heart was being bitten by insects. He couldn't help but shrink into a ball. It seemed that this could slow down the feeling. "I'll give you 3 more minutes to think about it." Dean's voice sounded. Richelieu was lying on the bright red carpet next to the sofa. He looked up and saw Dean standing a few meters away. There was an expensive cigarette in his hand. The end of the cigarette was lit, and he was gently smoking it. The smoke was inhaled and exhaled from his mouth. It made him look a bit vague. The cigarette that Dean was smoking was not made from mulberry leaves. It was similar to the cigarettes of the old era. It was less harmful, less addictive, and easy to quit. Seeing Dean sucking the cigarette, Richelieu instantly felt as if there were countless insects crawling on his throat. The itch was unbearable. He couldn't help but want to scratch his throat. But thinking of the shocking blood on his arm, he held back. He hammered the ground and growled in a low voice. At this moment, he had no time to think about why Dean was not poisoned but was smoking the antidote. Last minute, Dean took out a mulberry leaf cigarette from his pocket and rolled it on the toilet paper. He walked in front of Richelieu and his fingers loosened. The cigarette fell to the ground. Richelieu saw the cigarette fall to the ground. His eyes widened, and he quickly reached out to pick it up. Before his palm could touch the cigarette, a leather shoe stepped on the cigarette. The shoe twisted slightly and flattened the cigarette. Then it slowly moved away. Richelieu looked at the scene in a daze. Suddenly, he felt an unstoppable anger and humiliation welling up in his chest. He raised his head and glared at Dean with bloodshot eyes. However, all he saw was the same indifferent face. He gritted his teeth and even bared his teeth. He really wanted to punch and break Dean's face. But he knew that he would be defeated before he could hit Dean. Time passed slowly in the stalemate. The humiliation and anger slowly weakened again. The hunger and thirst turned into the voice of the devil, repeatedly hypnotizing himself in his mind. As long as he took a breath, he would be free. No one saw him here. He didn't lose face, moreover. He had already lost to Dean. He didn't have any face left. His boots were clean. He didn't step on them. He slowly stretched out his hand. His hand trembled as he picked up the cigarette. There was a trace of moisture in his eyes. At the same time, a strong hatred and killing intent sprouted in his heart. But he lowered his head. He didn't dare to let Dean notice. With a clatter, a box of matches was thrown in front of him. Dean turned back to Aisha and said to Nicotine, "Go to the basement and get another bottle of sleeping medicine." "Yes." Nicotine nodded. He secretly looked at the Pope, who had unknowingly knelt on the ground. There was a bit of complex and fear in his eyes. Richelieu couldn't wait to light the cigarette. He put it in his mouth and inhaled. He felt that he had jumped from hell to heaven. The unbearable itch and the crazy feeling of emptiness instantly disappeared. There was only a comfortable feeling as if he had fallen into the clouds. There was no trace of pain. It was as if his soul had left his body and was soaring in the sky. There was a trace of emotion in Dean's eyes as he looked at Richelieu's intoxicated face. He knew that the liquid of the mulberry leaf had completely penetrated into his bloodstream. He couldn't quit anymore. Moreover, every time after the injection, he would have to endure to the limit. Then he would have to take the mulberry leaf again and again. This kind of relapse would only make the addiction stronger and more difficult to resist. Moreover, the effect of this thing had been shown. Not only was it intoxicating, but it would also wear down a person's willpower, spirit, and other aspects. Dudeen asked Nicholas to give the sleeping pill to Richelieu, who had finished smoking the mulberry leaf cigarette. Soon Richelieu fell asleep. Dudeen left the castle with Aisha after giving a few words to Nicholas. In a castle of Lone Town. This was a small town near the bustling western district of the commercial district. Although it was a town, it was extremely prosperous. The people living in this town were either rich or noble. Magistrates, priests of the Holy Church, and teams of patrolling soldiers could be seen everywhere on the street. The public security here was very safe. For more than a decade, there hadn't been any attack by the Dark Believers. The lord of this town was the Ruckland family. This family name was very famous. Almost everyone in the upper class knew about it. One of the 8 cardinals of the Holy Church was the current patriarch of this family. At this moment, in the underground of the main castle of the Ruckland family, enthusiastic cheers sounded outside a round platform. This was an extremely spacious underground plaza, built exactly like the arena outside. The high dome was inlaid with many expensive fluorescent stones, and the faint light cast down illuminated the interior of the plaza. At the same time, it was a little dark and hazy. At this moment, on the round stage of the arena, surrounded by iron wires, a brawny man who was nearly 2 meters tall was fighting with a petite woman who was less than 7 meters tall. This woman had wheat skin and brown hair. At first glance, it was obvious that she was a commoner. There were many scars on her body, but the most eye-catching thing about her was her extremely revealing attire. She only had a tube top on her upper body and a pair of short underwear on her lower body. The clothes of a strong man were also very simple. His upper body was naked and he was wearing shorts. His muscles were bulging like dragons. He looked like a human-shaped tank. Kill, 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 kill her, kill this bitch. Some people covered their mouths with their hands and used them as microphones to make their voices louder. Most of these people had golden hair and wore expensive silk clothes. They wore gold, silver, and jade accessories. They had an extraordinary temperament. However, at this moment, they were like a group of ordinary people watching a show. They were wholeheartedly shouting and cheering. Bang! The strong man seized the opportunity and fiercely punched the woman's abdomen. The woman immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood. Her body bent like a shrimp. The strong man's face was ferocious. He mercilessly grabbed her hair and punched her in the face. With a bang, the woman's nose was broken and blood flowed out. Seeing the huge disparity in strength in this fierce battle, the cheers below the stage became even crazier. Countless people shouted excitedly, and, at the same time, there were people throwing gold coins on top of the barbed wire. The sound of gold coins falling on the stage was extremely pleasant to the ears. Hit her chest. Beat this bitch to death. Crush her body. Chapter 6:27. The brawny man had no tenderness for the fairer sex. With a ferocious expression, he grabbed the woman's hair with one hand and punched her face with the other. His moves were simple and violent. Every time he pulled back his fist, thick blood would stick to his fist like silk. Then, he would send his fist back to the woman's face. The woman screamed in pain, holding the arm of the strong man and struggling, but it seemed like she was shaking an iron wall. Her struggles soon weakened, and the screams gradually stopped. The arm that was holding the strong man drooped down powerlessly, leaving only a slight moan of pain. Blow her head off. Harder, harder. The audience cheered crazily. The strong man raised his head and looked around. Then his eyes fell on the woman in his hand. He raised his fist and punched her forehead. He punched her again and again until the back of his hand was numb. At this time, the woman even stopped moaning and stopped breathing. The strong man loosened the hand that was holding her hair, and the woman fell down and fell heavily on the stage. Her head was tilted, and a face that had been smashed was powerlessly looking at the barbed wire and the excited roaring faces outside the barbed wire. Her only remaining eye was drooping, lifeless and empty. No one noticed that in her dark, mirror-like pupils, a figure flashed past. Behind the spectator seats of this small underground arena was a narrow passageway. Behind the passageway was a circular wall that surrounded the arena on all four sides. Spacious passageways were set apart from each other. At this moment, people were leaving the spectator seats one after another, turning around and entering the dark passageway at the back. The rest of the people were still sitting in the spectator seats, excitedly preparing to watch the next match. The dark aisle was inlaid with sparse fluorescent stones, which looked much more luxurious than cheap oil lamps. The long aisle was extremely deep, and there were several forks. The people who came here were obviously very familiar with these forks, and they all walked to the place they wanted to go. Prana walked to the leftmost fork of the long aisle. On the wall of this long aisle, there was a door at regular intervals. Obviously, there were rooms inside. Prana walked to the dark golden pattern door with the number 108 engraved on it. As soon as he approached it, he heard a burst of childish crying. He sighed in his heart, knowing that this man was addicted to playing again. He raised his hand and knocked lightly on the door, then stood respectfully at the door, waiting for a response. A moment later, an irritated voice came from the room. "Who's so blind? Do you want to die?" Prana hurriedly said respectfully, "Sir, it's me. Sir Rookland asked me to pass a message to you." Although Rookland was a surname, with the addition of Lord, there was no doubt that it was Rookland West. "Come in." The irascible voice inside said in a low voice, filled with suppressed anger. The door was open from the inside. A fair-skinned young knight smiled at Prana and said softly, "Please, sir." "Thank you." Prana didn't dare to be negligent. He knew that this person was the Lord's trusted aide and the man he doted on the most. When he entered the room, the faint childish voice that he had heard earlier became even clearer. He saw that this was an extremely spacious room with a large bed and a few wardrobes. In addition, there were some shelves with strange utensils hanging on them, as well as a weapon rack. The things on the rack were not swords or sabers, but whips and ropes with dense iron spikes. At first glance, it looked like a torture room for prisoners. Prana looked to the side of the bed and saw a slender, middle-aged man leaning on the big bed with two small figures in his arms. One was a little girl about 7 or 8 years old, and the other was a little boy about 4 or 5 years old. The two children's skin was relatively clean. Obviously, they did not come from poor families. There were no dark spots on their hands and faces. They looked extremely cute. However, at this moment, there were obvious tears on the two children's faces, and their black eyes were filled with fear. Every time the middle-aged man's hand touched their hair, the fear in their eyes would increase a bit. In addition to these two children, there were 3 other children on the bed, but they were all sitting on the edge of the bed, their bodies curled up, trembling, and making soft sobbing sounds. Prana glanced at them. Although he felt uncomfortable, he didn't frown. He looked extremely calm on the surface. If it was him 10 years ago, he wouldn't be able to be so calm. Sir Ruckland asked me to tell you that there's news from His Excellency the Pope, Prana said respectfully. The middle-aged man on the bed raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. Is he dead or alive? Hearing his rude words, Prana wasn't surprised at all. He still said respectfully, His Excellency the Pope seems to be fine, but after holding the blessing ceremony in Martha Square, he disappeared again. Huh? What's going on? The middle-aged man said unhappily. What's this old guy doing running around? Prana said respectfully, Sir Ruckland asked me to bring a message to you, sir, to talk in detail. So annoying. The middle-aged man was a bit impatient. But even so, he still slowly sat up from the bed and used his hands to pinch the soft cheeks of the two children. The irritation in his eyes suddenly turned into greed and desire. He licked his lips, picked up the little girl, and kissed her hard. The little girl was so scared that she tried to resist, pushing his chest with her little hands. But how could she move him at all? Suddenly, the little girl screamed and cried loudly. At this time, the middle-aged man opened his mouth, but there was half a piece of soft flesh in his mouth, and he chewed it gently. It was the little girl's lips. Delicious! The middle-aged man closed his eyes and chewed with great enjoyment. After chewing and swallowing, he slowly opened his eyes and touched the head of the little girl who was crying in pain. There was a doting, fatherly look in his eyes. He said softly, Be good, be obedient, understand? The little girl couldn't stop crying. She screamed in pain, tears streaming down her face. The middle-aged man smiled and got off the bed. He stepped on the clean wooden floor with his bare feet and said to the fair-skinned young knight by the door, Bring my clothes. The young knight nodded respectfully, took out a luxurious suit from the wardrobe, and put it on for him. The middle-aged man stretched out his hands like a hanger, enjoying his service. When the young knight put on his tie, he asked, You're not jealous, are you? How could I be? The young knight's face was slightly red. The middle-aged man laughed and adjusted his tie himself. He looked at his attire in the mirror outside the wardrobe and was quite satisfied. Then he took out a precision mechanical watch made by master craftsmen and put on a hat. He looked elegant, and it was obvious that he was a person of great etiquette and education. Let's go, the middle-aged man said. The young knight glanced at the 5 children on the bed and said, What about them? As usual, kill them and feed them to the little loach. The middle-aged man said casually, and then he buttoned his sleeves while turning around, ready to go out. You haven't even put on your clothes. Why are you in such a hurry to go out? A calm voice sounded. When the middle-aged man heard this voice, he didn't think much about it. He looked down and immediately saw that the buttons on his clothes were not fastened properly. He frowned and was a little angry. Suddenly, the young knight behind him cried out in surprise, You! Who are you? Hearing this, the middle-aged man suddenly reacted, and all the hair on his body stood up. He looked up and suddenly saw that there was a figure in a black robe standing by the door. The loose hood covered most of his face, revealing a fair and handsome chin. Chapter 628. Hearing the words supervisor, the middle-aged man's face suddenly changed. He looked at Dean angrily. Who are you? There were very few people in the outer wall who knew his name. Even the Rookland family didn't know his identity. They only knew that he was a big shot from the inner wall and had extraordinary power. Are you Prince Riley? Prana recognized Dean's appearance by the glimmer of the fluorescent stone. Why are you here? Didn't you go missing? Riley? Middle-aged man asked. Do you know him? Prana hurriedly said, Sir, His Highness Riley was the most outstanding knight of the Vatican in the past 20 years. He was extremely talented in sword arts and came from a noble family. However, he should have been missing for a long time. I heard that he died in the line of duty. I didn't expect. That's weird. Wasn't His Highness Riley blonde? Why is his hair black now? Holy Church. Middle-aged man was relieved as he heard Dean's words. He thought that Dean was from the inner wall when Dean revealed his real identity. He didn't expect Dean to be a knight from the Holy Church in the outer wall. The most outstanding knight of the Holy Church in the last 20 years. The middle-aged man completely disdained Dean's words. No matter how smart you are still a lowly person. I usually don't like to be long-winded when I kill people. Dean slowly raised the dagger in his hand. But for a person like you, it's too easy to kill him with a sneak attack. Death isn't terrible because you won't even feel pain after death. So why should you be afraid? So I have to slow down the process of your death. I will let you taste your own death in order to let you experience fear and despair. Dean's dark eyes narrowed as he spoke. There was a trace of malice in his eyes. The middle-aged man heard Dean's words and sneered. You know my identity, but you still dare to come here to die. I advise you to honestly confess who sent you here. You probably don't know that the purpose of the person who sent you here is to send you to your death. Because he didn't clearly tell you how strong I am. Whoosh! A sudden gust of wind interrupted the rest of his words. Suddenly, an incoming fist smashed into his face. With a bang, his body flipped backwards and fell onto the soft bed behind him, rolling a few times. Puff! Puff! At the same time, the sound of two blades rubbing against flesh echoed. Prana and the young knight were stunned as they looked at Dean. Their mouths slightly opened, but they couldn't say a word. Blood spurted out from their throats as they stiffly fell on their backs. The middle-aged man was lying on the bed. His mind was a mess, his ears were buzzing, and he felt dizzy. He struggled to turn his head and saw Dean standing beside the bed, looking at him condescendingly. It seemed that Dean had no intention of continuing to attack. He took a deep breath, and the dizziness immediately subsided. He hurriedly supported himself with his palms and leaped backward, landing on the other side of the bed. He bent down and quickly searched under the bed. Soon, he pulled out a bright silver sword. The tinnitus and dizziness disappeared after he held the sword. He stared at Dean, who was on the other side of the bed. His heart was full of shock. Didn't Prana say that Dean was a knight of the Holy Church? Wasn't the upper limit of strength in the outer wall a senior hunter? But he couldn't react to the power and speed that Dean had used. He was a primary limitless hunter. Moreover, he had mastered 2 secret combat techniques taught by the monastery. It was rare for him to be defeated in a fight against someone of the same rank. But he was defeated in a single move. Moreover, he had lost completely. If this person had attacked a weapon just now, then he would have been dead by now. Although he was careless, but the speed that exceeded his reaction speed was not something that a hunter could achieve, even if he had an extremely rare magic mark. Dean looked at him indifferently. His motionless body suddenly flashed, and a sudden fast movement made the middle-aged man's eyelids jump. He could barely see a vague shadow. He was scared and hurriedly waved his knife. Silver light flashed, and countless knife lights formed a shield in front of him. Suddenly, he felt pain in his feet, as if he was hit by a hard steel rod. His body instantly lost balance and fell down. His heart sank, and a gap appeared in the dense saber light. He raised his other hand to support himself and stabilize his body, but a black light suddenly shot out from the gap of the messy saber light and hit his chest. A heart-wrenching pain shot through him, and his back smashed hard against the wooden floor. All of this took a long time to describe, but it all ended in a matter of seconds. The middle-aged man was about to fight back when he felt the pain in his chest. But he felt that his right hand that was holding the sword was pinched by a cold palm. It was not so much a palm, but a piece of ice. Gotcha! The bones and joints of his wrist were twisted and dislocated. He roared in pain and raised his other hand. However, his other hand was also pinched by a strong palm. He couldn't break free as a burst of pain came. His left hand was also twisted and dislocated. You like children, so I'll let you become a child. Dean's indifferent voice came out unhurriedly. There was no trace of trembling in his voice. It seemed that he still had some strength left in him after the fierce battle. The middle-aged man didn't react to Dean's words. He felt that his feet were pinched. The next moment, he suddenly understood. A burst of crisp and powerful sounds of bones breaking rang out, like the sound of bamboo being chopped. The pain that came instantly caused the middle-aged man to scream. However, just as he screamed, something was stuffed into his mouth, and he immediately turned into a muffled sound. In the blink of an eye, Dean folded the middle-aged man's limbs into a cross. He sat on the folded hands and feet and looked at the back of the middle-aged man's head. He gently cut the middle-aged man's ear with a dagger. With a little force, one of the middle-aged man's ears was cut off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The middle-aged man trembled and screamed in pain. You could have enjoyed the treatment of a quick death. There was no pain. Dean used the dagger to cut wounds on the middle-aged man's face and neck. From time to time, he stabbed the dagger into the bloody seam of these wounds. He indifferently said, "But your mistake is to kill people unnecessarily. You have to know that people live in groups. So other people are a resource. But you needlessly waste this precious resource. It's really stupid." The middle-aged man's facial features twisted in pain. He screamed in pain. Dean rotated the dagger and quickly cut all parts of the middle-aged man's body. He cut off the broken hands and feet piece by piece. One of the arms was cut off to expose the bones. After more than 10 minutes, he ended the middle-aged man's life. When he got up, the 5 children on the big bed were scared and hurriedly shrank to a corner, shivering. Dean glanced at the children's fear. As if he was talking to himself, he whispered, "In your eyes, I'm no different from him, isn't it?" The 5 children just looked at him in fear. The girl who had her lips bitten off was too scared to cry. Maybe there's a little difference. Dean saw their expressions and said to himself, "A little more terrible." He put on the hood again, but only covered his hair. Then he walked around the big bed, opened the door, and walked out of the room. When he was torturing the middle-aged man, he always used thermal vision to observe the outside of the room. The reason why he ended the torture of the middle-aged man was because he saw the opportunity to leave. After leaving the room, he didn't walk a few steps. When he passed a fork, he met 2 blonde young nobles. The 2 smelled of alcohol, but they were not drunk. Dean deliberately walked between the 2 of them and pushed their shoulders away. The 2 felt a little pain from the bump. They immediately shouted at Dean, who was walking in front of them, "Brat, stop! How can you walk? Are you blind?" Dean turned his head and glanced at them. The faint fluorescent stone on the wall shone on his face. The 2 nobles were about to curse, but when they saw Dean's face, they were shocked. They saw that Dean's face was stained with blood. With a pair of cold eyes, the 2 suddenly felt a chill from the soles of their feet. Dean took back his eyes, turned his head, and quickly left. The 2 nobles looked at Dean's back as he disappeared into the passage. They slowly looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Inside the castle, Rucland West frowned. He didn't expect Prana to not return yet. He immediately called the butler and was about to ask him to send someone to call him again. Suddenly, there was a clanking sound of hurried armor outside. "Elder, there is an accident underground." A knight wearing a special heavy armor of the Rucland family ran in. "There is news from the people who are on duty underground. Mr. Prana and the elder, they died in the room." Chapter 629. They died in the room? Rucland West suspected that he was hallucinating and frowned. "Say it again. Who died?" "My lord, it's Mr. Prana and the lord. They are dead." The heavy armored knight glanced at him and said in a careful tone. Suddenly, he suspected that the armored knight in front of him was messing with him. If Prana was dead, he could accept it. But how could that lord, a master who is even stronger than the Great Light King, die here? Who in the entire outer wall could kill him. Was it someone from the inner wall? Such a thought flashed in his mind. He looked at the armored knight. Are you sure? Absolutely. The armored knight bowed his head. Ruclan's face changed as he got up. Take me to see. The armored knight got up and led the way. A moment later, the two of them arrived at room 108 in the underground passage. At this moment, the underground world had been sealed off, and Ruckland West's secret army was guarding the various passes. Ruclan's heart sank as he opened the door to the room. He smelled the smell of blood and the sound of sobbing. He looked up and saw several of his men standing in the room to protect the scene. There were two corpses lying on the floor. They were Prana and the personal attendant of the Lord. His expression changed slightly as he asked in a deep voice, "Where is his corpse?" "My lord here." A middle-aged man with a scar on his face whispered. Ruckland Steeder hoped to hear the word no from his mouth, but when he saw the direction he was pointing in, his heart turned completely cold. On the other side of the bed, there was a large amount of blood and messy, minced flesh. In addition, there were severed arms. It was like a slaughterhouse. He slowly walked over and immediately saw a mutilated body lying on the ground. Only the clothes were recognizable to him. Even the face had been cut so badly that it was completely indistinguishable. Even if he was experienced and had witnessed hundreds of crimes committed by the evil people of the Dark Church, he was still disgusted by this scene. He wanted to vomit. It couldn't be said that there was a corpse on the ground. It was a pile of flesh and blood. Moreover, it was obviously destroyed by someone. It was hard to imagine how much pain and fear the deceased must have suffered before their death. It was hard to imagine how much despair and pain they must have felt. He took a deep breath and felt the stench of blood flowing in his chest, making him nauseous. He raised his hand to pinch his chin and cover his nose. He slowly turned around, his mind spinning. Judging from the clothes and the mechanical watch on the wrist, the deceased was undoubtedly His Excellency. However, who was the person who could kill that lord? There must be unimaginable hatred to kill him in such a cruel way. Could it be that his enemies from the inner wall have come to find him? Will his enemies vent their anger on me? Thinking of this, he felt a chill run down his spine. He suddenly felt that his surroundings were filled with danger, filled with invisible arrows, knives, and spears. He deserved to die. Ruckland West took a deep breath as he glanced at the people around him. How long has he been dead? How did the murderer sneak into our Ruckland family and assassinate him? The people around him looked at each other, but couldn't answer. But they knew that the master suspected that there was a mole in the family. Ruckland West slowly glanced at the expressions of the people around him. His eyes shifted to the shivering children on the bed. He naturally didn't suspect that there was a mole among his men. How could a person who could kill the Lord need a mole? He was just worried that the person hadn't left, but was still mixed in with his team of knights. "Have you been here all this time?" Ruckland West asked the children. He had long been aware of the Lord's special hobbies. He had ordered people to find these children for him. The children looked at him with their black and white eyes. Their faces were full of fear. Ruckland West frowned slightly and turned around. These children are witnesses. They must have seen the entire process of the murderer's crime. Take them away and interrogate them about the murderer's appearance. Remember, don't scare them anymore. Otherwise, they'll have a mental breakdown and nothing will come out of them. Yes, the middle-aged man nodded. In addition, Ruckland West continued, don't spread this matter out. You will be responsible for half a word. Yes, several people replied in unison. Father. At this time, an urgent voice came from outside. A youth with brown hair quickly ran in. Ruckland West frowned as he looked at his son's brown hair. What's the matter? The youth replied, Father, I found two witnesses. They should know some clues. Oh, Ruckland West's eyes lit up as he said, bring them here. The youth immediately said, Father, I've already interrogated them. The two of them told me what happened. According to the time of the crime, when it happened, they happened to pass by outside and were about to go out to gamble. In the end, they met a person in the corridor. That person's face was covered in blood, and it scared the two of them, but they didn't think much about it. They thought that the person had played with one of the slaves and went overboard. Later on, they found out that an important person had died here, so they associated it with that person. Then they told this matter to their good friend, the guard, and the guard told me. Recland West was startled and immediately said, "You mean they bumped into the murderer in the corridor?" "Yes." The youth said, "At that time the murderer was in a hurry and bumped into them. That's how they noticed the murderer's face." Recland West immediately said, "Immediately find a painter and cooperate with them. Draw the murderer's face and publish it on the wanted list of the Dark Church. Let the Dark Church find the murderer for us." The youth respectfully replied, "Father, I have found a painter to draw the murderer's portrait. I will immediately send it to my elder brother. He has a lot of connections. I will ask him to publish it on the Dark Church's list." Recland West didn't expect the son he disliked the most to be so efficient. He had looked down on him in the past. He immediately said, "Let me have a look first." The youth respectfully handed it over. Recland West opened the portrait. It was an extremely lifelike sketch. He looked at it and suddenly felt that this person was somewhat familiar. After looking at it carefully for a moment, he suddenly thought of someone. Riley, the long-lost swordsman? There was a trace of surprise in Recland West's eyes. He carefully looked at the portrait and felt that it was very similar. However, this portrait was somewhat different from the one he had seen. It should be the difference between the two eyewitnesses and the painter's understanding. Is it just a person who looks similar? Riley? How could it be him? How could he kill him? Riley was the Pope's favorite knight. His disappearance has always been a mystery. Did the Pope deliberately arrange all of this? Did he secretly send him to the inner wall for further study? Recland West's heart was a bit scared. The Pope had the authority to enter the inner wall. It shouldn't be difficult for him to send someone to the inner wall. If that was the case, then wasn't the disappearance of the Pope a part of the Pope's plan? Moreover, the most important thing was, why did the Pope send him to assassinate the elder? Was it because he was aware of the forces that he was secretly operating and was ready to deal with him? Chapter 630. A young commoner held the hand of a veiled woman in a purple cheapao as they walked out of Lone Town. They didn't follow the official road that was crowded with vehicles. Instead, they went straight to the dense forest in the nearby wilderness and traversed through it. There were many ferocious beasts such as wild wolves, snakes, and pigs in the wilderness, so civilians did not dare to approach. However, there was a transport trail in the dense forest. This was a shortcut opened by the caravan in a hurry. When the caravan passed through this place, they would often hire some retired soldiers or adventurers who had explored the radiation zone as guards. After all, in this dense forest, in addition to the wild wolves and hungry tigers, it was said that there were also robbers and bandits, and there were even some dark cultists who made people tremble with fear. They were doing secret and evil experiments here. Dean took Aisha along the caravan trail. Russell. On the way, a few robbers wearing green grass clothes suddenly jumped out of the grass and blocked Dean's way with knives. "Ha, boss. We met a fat sheep in the first time we came out." "Stutter, don't talk so much. You're losing your momentum." "Umph, you two dare to come here. You're simply courting death." "Boy, hurry up." And the robbers hadn't finished their opening lines when Dean's figure suddenly sped up. He waved his wrist, and the bell jingled. Seeing him rushing towards them like a gust of wind, the bandits were immediately dumbfounded and stunned on the spot. Dean and Aisha jumped at the same time and flew over the heads of the robbers. They jumped to a height of more than 10 meters and fell behind the robbers. They continued to run without looking back. The robbers looked back and saw that Dean and Aisha had run far away. They could only see their backs in the distance. "Boss, have you ever seen a person who can jump to the top of a tree?" "Boss, I want to go back and be a good person." Dean walked along the dense forest. Along the way, he met a hungry tiger, but he easily killed it. 10 minutes later, he left the dense forest and came to a village. Then he went straight through the outskirts of the village and rushed to the residence of the next Dean through the nearest road. Padre Commercial Street was one of the 4 great economic centers of the business district. There were all kinds of large-scale trade markets, as well as various kinds of entertainment industries. Among them, the most profitable place was undoubtedly the largest casino in Padre Commercial Street. There was a square outside the Vero Casino. The main purpose of this square was not to hold a prayer ceremony for the Holy Church or to set up sculptures to worship the ancestors and gods. It was for the rich and nobles who came to the Vero Casino to park their carriages. The square was full of carriages all year round. There were all kinds of carriages and the badges and flags of various noble families. At this moment, in a luxurious room on the top floor of Vero Casino, 7 or 8 blonde and fair-skinned nobles sat around a round table. This was a top-notch room for nobles. The minimum amount of chips in the casino was equivalent to 50 years of savings for an ordinary family. There were fruit juices, champagne, food, and so on next to the gambling table. Akane spun the chips in his hand. After a while, he sighed and got up to leave the table. He patted the knight behind him on the shoulder. "Come play for me," he said. "I need to get some luck." The knight respectfully replied, "Yes." It wasn't the first time he encountered such a situation. Usually when Ikone lost a lot, he would let the knight replace him to play for a few rounds. Akane didn't watch from the side, but went to the rest area of the box. From here, he could overlook most of the scenery outside the casino. The bustling streets were bustling with pedestrians, and there were countless luxury carriages parked in the distance. Such a beautiful scene could only be seen in the bustling cities of the inner wall. But the cost of living in the bustling cities of the inner wall was too expensive. Even a noble like Akane would feel distressed at the expense of living in such a bustling city. He gently tasted the red wine. Although he had lost a lot today, it didn't affect his mood. He was in a good mood ever since he came to the outer wall. The barren, backward, and dirty area was far cleaner and richer than he had imagined. It gave him a big surprise. He even felt that it wasn't a bad thing to live here in his later years. It was better to be treated as a lord by a group of untouchables than to be despised by a group of real nobles. "Sir, this is snow mountain truffle. It is very expensive. You can't find it in the inner wall. You could try it." Another knight pointed to a plate of food on the table and recommended it to Ikone. Ikone looked at it and scooped a little with a spoon. He felt that the taste was soft and sweet. It was extremely refreshing and delicious. He couldn't help but praise. "The people of the outer wall are better at enjoying food than us." The knight smiled. "This is the food that the nobles of the outer wall are entitled to enjoy. These nobles have learned our etiquette education, so they know how to enjoy food." Ikone looked at him. "Everything here is good, but there is one thing that makes me feel uncomfortable. Do you know what it is?" The knight bowed his head. "This subordinate doesn't dare to speculate. It's them." Ikone's tone was obviously directed at the people around the other side of the box. "I feel disgusted when I see the untouchables have the same blonde hair as me." The knight immediately realized that he had made a slip of the tongue and hurriedly said, "Your subordinate understands. Untouchables will always be untouchables. Even if they are mixed blood untouchables, they will have the same blood flowing in their veins." Ikone coldly said, "This is something that can't be changed. It's like the barbarians outside the borders. Even if they kidnap civilians to give birth to their children, they will still give birth to uncivilized bastards." The attendant broke out in a cold sweat. He lowered his head and said, "Sir is right." Ikone glanced at the blonde youth on the other side of the table. "What are you looking at?" The blonde youth quickly replied, "Nothing. I think I heard wrong." He turned back to the table and no longer cared about the things that had nothing to do with him. Ikone finished the truffle and looked outside. Seeing that it was getting late, he said, "The Camilla family has invited us for lunch. Let's get ready to go." "Yes." The knight acknowledged respectfully and went to the side of the table. He called for the knight who had replaced Ikone to get ready to leave. A fat middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table saw that Ikone was about to leave and hurriedly got up. "Mr. Ikone, are you going back so early? Why don't you play a little longer? If you don't have enough money, I can lend you some." "No need," Ikone said indifferently. "I have an invitation for lunch. I'm going." The middle-aged man understood and smiled. "Then I won't hold you back. Have a safe trip. Come back next time." He reached out to hold Ikone's hand and sent him to the door. "You can continue playing." Ikone let go of his hand and left with the two knights. When the door to the box closed, he took out a handkerchief and wiped his fingers. After wiping them clean one by one, he crumpled the handkerchief into a ball and threw it into the rubbish bin in the corridor. Soon, the three of them left the Grand Casino and arrived at the carriage in the square. The two knights escorted him into the carriage. Iconi's pupils shrank as soon as he entered the carriage. He saw two figures sitting silently in the spacious carriage, a man and a woman, silent like two ghosts. Chapter 631. Dean grabbed his collar and pulled his body into the carriage. The two knights outside didn't notice the assassination. One of the knights jumped into the carriage and acted as the coachman. They were ready to set off. The other knight waited for Abyssal's body to fully enter the carriage before grabbing the door and climbing the stairs into the carriage. As soon as he entered, he, who habitually lowered his head in humility, saw 6 feet in the carriage. He looked up and saw a flash of silver light. Then he didn't know what happened. The dead knight fell down and hit the carriage. The knight outside was aware of a trace of strangeness. "Sir?" There was no response. A streak of silver light suddenly shot out from the curtain and pierced his throat at lightning speed. Then, it was quickly pulled out and returned to the carriage. The knight clutched his throat and looked at the carriage in horror. Although the carriage was fast, he clearly saw the hand holding the dagger. It was not Iconi's hand, nor was it his companion's hand. There was someone else hiding in the carriage. His eyes were filled with fear. He couldn't stop the blood from flowing out of his throat. He opened his mouth slightly, wanting to call for help, but he couldn't make a sound. All his strength and thoughts seemed to have been sucked out of him. His vision went black, and he collapsed. Dean took Aisha out of the carriage. It was as if they were a noble couple going to a banquet. They walked along the aisle and left the square where countless carriages were parked. Not long after they left, an aristocrat came to stop the carriage. He accidentally saw the knight lying on the carriage frame. He wondered who the servant was. How could he sleep here without any manners? Soon, the nobleman noticed the blood dripping from the carriage frame and the pool of blood on the ground. Only then did he notice that the knight's posture was too strange, as if he was about to fall off the ground. The aristocrat immediately let his guard come forward to check. Soon the news of a knight's death reached the aristocrat's ears. The news quickly spread to the streets outside the square. The patrolling soldiers and knights of the magistrate were alarmed. The atmosphere of terror spread. Aristocrats and rich people who came to play heard the news and immediately drove away. One had to know that in such a prosperous economic center, someone was actually assassinated here. This was simply terrifying for them. No one was willing to stay in the same environment with an unknown murderer, especially the security here, which was known as an impenetrable wall. They could no longer be trusted. The afternoon passed quickly. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Dean arrived at the 9th region of the Dark Church. After a whole morning of hunting, he had beheaded all 5 supervisors. Except for the child abuser that he had encountered at the beginning, which took him a bit of time, the rest of the 4 supervisors were taken care of. He could come and go freely in the secret places of the outer wall without any difficulty. "Stop!" The guard stopped Dean. Dean took out a great potion master's identity token and handed it to the guard. The guard looked at him and was shocked. He didn't expect the young man in front of him to be a great demonic apothecary. Cold sweat broke out all over his body as he respectfully said, "Greetings, Mr. Great Demonic Apothecary." Dean took Aisha's hand and entered together with her. Dean went directly to the 2nd floor of the Dark Hall after arriving at the underground world of the castle. He followed the smell and found Hawkeye. At the same time, he noticed the undercover wolf who was confessed by Richelieu. "Elder, you are here." Hawkeye's attitude was very respectful as he saw Dean. He had heard about Dean suppressing the 12 elders of the Philin family. He knew that the youth in front of him had terrifying strength. Even if Hawkeye didn't rely on him, he didn't have a second choice. Hawkeye could only hug him tightly. Dean said, "Call the wolf." "Yes." After a moment, Wolf was summoned by Hawkeye. Wolf was a bit nervous as he saw Dean again. He didn't dare to put on airs. His attitude was extremely humble. "Elder, come sit in my office. The air is good there." Dean waved his hand, It doesn't matter. I just want to ask you a few questions. Please ask. I'll tell you everything I know. Shooting Wolf said with a smile. Dean casually said, Tell me everything you know about Pope Richelieu. Include his relatives, friends, lovers, family, and his resume when he was young and so on. Wolf was startled, but soon relieved. Dean was one of the 12 elders of the Dark Church. It wasn't unusual for him to inquire about the Pope. Wolf immediately replied, I don't know much about the Pope. I only know that the Pope was a talented knight when he was young. He was born in a noble family. However, the Pope's family has been very low-key. Not to mention the Scott and Mel families. Even the other small families can't compare with them. Is it to avoid arousing suspicion? That's normal. Dean nodded. There shouldn't be many members of his family left. Has he not contacted his family for a long time? Yes. Shoot Wolf nodded and said, In order to prevent the Dark Church, we threatened him. So he separated himself from his family. Moreover, he obscured his family's matters. Ordinary civilians don't even know that he has a family. They also don't know that he is a noble. Dean nodded. What about his wife and children? None? Wolf shook his head. I don't know about that. Dean quietly looked at him. He got up and said to Hawkeye, Lead the way to the torture room. You come with me. Wolf was startled. He felt that something was wrong. Was he going to torture him? But looking at Dean's expression, it didn't seem that he was going to torture him. Moreover, there was no reason to use torture to interrogate him. He decided to take a look first, so he immediately followed behind Dean. Under Hawkeye's lead, the three of them soon came to an underground torture room built on the other side of the square. This was an important prison of the Ninth Area. Most of them were people from the Dark Church, while some were people from the Holy Church. There were also people from the military and magistrate. Even nobles were imprisoned here. The three of them went straight to the torture room. Dean glanced at the torture instruments in the room. There were many types of torture rooms in the Dark Church. They were 10 times more exaggerated than the torture rooms in the Thornflower prison. He was glad that he had entered the Thornflower prison and not the Dark Church's prison. His identity was different now, so he knew different things. Although the Thornflower prison was known as the #1 prison in the outer wall, but it was only the #1 prison on the surface. There were many other prisons that were more terrifying than the Thornflower prison. The two largest prisons were the penitent prison of the Holy Church and the top-secret torture chamber of the military. Anyone who was imprisoned in there was a character who could make the earth tremble. Any one of them was either a great potion master or a general-level existence. Old man, come and have a taste, Dean said to Wolf, who was next to him. Shooting Wolf was shocked. He forced a smile and said, Elder, you are so humorous. It's your humor. Dean picked up a string of spikes from the wall and came in front of Wolf. He wrapped the chain around Wolf's body. Shooting Wolf was scared and didn't dare to move. He saw Dean's unhurried appearance, but he still held a hope that Dean was just trying to scare him. No matter what, he was a dignified elder, and he didn't offend Dean in any way. Hawkeye saw this scene and was a little surprised, but he hid the shock in his eyes and silently looked down at his toes, not daring to express any thoughts. Dean came to Shooting Wolf's back and pulled with his palm. Poochie sounds rang out, accompanied by the sound of clothes being cut and Shooting Wolf screams. Dean pulled both ends of the chain tightly. The finger-long triangular spikes on the chain pierced into the wolf's body. Blood immediately dyed his robe red. Dean tied the chain and kicked Wolf's back. Then he went to the torture rack and picked 2 new torture tools. He returned to Wolf and said, You are an undercover agent arranged by Richelieu. You used to be the librarian of the highest library in the Holy Church. You should have read a lot of books. If you can't be honest about the situation of the Pope, then I'll have to dig out word by word. Shooting Wolf, whose whole body was in incomparable pain, heard Dean's words. His whole body suddenly felt cold, and even the pain in his body suddenly disappeared. He looked at Dean in horror. If Dean had only said the first sentence, he could still refute, but he didn't expect Dean to know that he was the librarian of the library. In addition to the Pope, only a few people knew about this identity. Since Dean knew this, it was obvious that he had the exact information. Even so, he still wanted to struggle and said, Elder, you have misunderstood me. I, I really am not a librarian, nor am I a spy, ignorant. Dean shook his head and immediately started the torture. Half an hour later, Shooting Wolf, who was covered in wounds and covered in blood, finally opened his mouth and revealed a lot of information. Dean wrote them down one by one, and then continued to torture. Only when Shooting Wolf breathed his last breath did he confirm that he had dug out all the information he knew. There was not a trace left. Chapter 632. In a magnificent palace on Mount Wutaw, the maid in charge of taking care of the young master looked around the room. The room was too big, like the hall of a hall. The dome was high, and the area was wide. It was hard to imagine that this was the bedroom of a child who was less than 6 meters tall. Young master, come out. Don't hide. The maid shouted anxiously. His voice reverberated in the empty room and traveled very far. The maid saw that the call was useless, so she had to go inside the room to search. When she went deep into the room, a figure jumped out from behind a stone pillar near the door and quickly rushed out of the room. The sound of the door closing alarmed the maid. When she turned her head to look, she immediately turned pale with fright and hurriedly chased after the figure. "Young master, don't go out, quickly come back." As she shouted, she opened the door and chased after the figure. A small figure quickly disappeared from the corner of the corridor. Boyce ran all the way out of the square and arrived in front of a white jade staircase leading to St. Mark's Square at the top of the mountain. When the 2 Knights of Light on duty saw this young master, they immediately saluted respectfully. Boyce immediately asked, "They said that my grandfather is missing. Is it true?" The 2 Knights of Light looked at each other. One of them winked to persuade the other not to talk too much. Although Boyce was young, but he had always been clever, he shouted, "If you don't tell the truth, then I'll demote you to apprentices and hunt down the dark believers every day." The 2 Knights of Light's complexion slightly changed. Although the young master didn't have such rights, but his grandfather the Pope did. Moreover, the nurse who took care of him had always doted on him and was also one of the 8 cardinal bishops. If this little guy complained to her, she would definitely be removed from her position. Chasing the followers of darkness every day? What kind of joke was this? That was a matter of throwing one's life away. Another knight smiled. "Young master, don't worry. His Highness the Pontiff hasn't disappeared. He just encountered some problems, so he temporarily left Wutaw Mountain. He is secretly planning to destroy the Dark Church in another place." Boyce looked at him. "Really? It's true," the knight said solemnly. Boyce saw the serious look in his eyes. He snorted, "Get out of the way." The 2 of them stepped aside. Boyce immediately ran up the stairs. He crossed 4 or 5 steps at a time. His speed was astonishing. He was like a cheetah in the forest. The 2 Knights of Light turned their heads and looked at the back of the young master, who was flying away. They were secretly speechless. One of them exclaimed in a low voice, "Young master's strength is probably stronger than both of us, right?" Not only that, another knight exclaimed, "The young master has been trained by the Great Light King since he was 3 years old. He's already 9 years old now. If he were to fight, he might be able to fight a head commander. When the young master grows up, he will be the future Great Light King." While the 2 Knights of Light were sighing, Boyce quickly ran up the mountain path. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the mountain forest and leaves fluttered in the air. Boyce raised his hand to cover his eyes, and the wind disappeared. When he lowered his hand, he saw a shadow in front of him. "You?" Boyce looked at the man in surprise. On a small hill at the edge of Mount Utopia, there lived the apprentice knights and junior knights of light who were stationed here. In one of the more simple and crude houses, Barton carried his sweaty and smelly clothes, which had piled up for several days, to the well outside. He scooped up some water and poured it into a wooden basin. Then he returned to his own room and prepared to soak these clothes for a while before washing them. He hadn't sat down when a dull voice echoed in the room. "Long time no see. How are you?" Barton was shocked. He saw a black-haired figure sitting next to his bed. Barton was stunned when he saw his face. Dean." He was startled for a moment before he reacted. "You? Why are you here?" "Only we can come in here." Did you sneak in? Dean quietly looked at him. I came here to find you. Find me? Barton suddenly noticed that there was a child lying on the bed behind Dean. It seemed that the child was asleep. Have you heard about my matter? Dean quietly asked. Barton responded. He was sent to an aristocratic family by Dean. When the Holy Church was recruiting apprentice knights, he participated in the assessment. Although his hair color was not golden and his body had some deformities and problems, but because he was registered as an aristocrat, he successfully passed the assessment and became a member of the Holy Church. His life and cognition had undergone earth-shaking changes after he became an apprentice knight. He was no longer a poor boy who sneaked into the commercial district from the slums. He was no longer a bird without a nest under Dean's wings. As a trainee knight of light, he naturally had the right to read the newspaper of the Holy Church for free. He read a lot of things and learned a lot from it. He also read the news that Dean had colluded with the dark cultists and was arrested in the inner wall. I heard about it. Barton looked at the living Dean in front of him. He was no longer a poor boy who could only look up at the commercial district. He knew that the inner wall was the most mysterious place. It was far more powerful than the commercial district. Even the ancient nobles who lived in the commercial district would try their best to join the inner wall. This was the best proof of that. How come you're here? Weren't you caught in the inner wall? Did you sneak out of the inner wall? Dean nodded and stared at him. I need you now. Are you willing to follow me? Barton was stunned. Continue to follow Dean? Before Dean appeared, he had tried to ask himself this question. Every night, he would secretly ask himself. The answer had been firm, but it had also been shaken. After all, the poor days in the orphanage had penetrated deep into his bones. He couldn't bear to look back. Every day after he followed Dean, he lived in fear. He was worried that the magistrate would find him. He was worried that he would be punished by the Holy Church. He was worried that he would be thrown into the fire as an evil believer. Now that he had become a trainee knight of light, although his life was not very good, but at least he could eat and wear warm clothes. Moreover, he was able to raise his head and walk on the street. The people around him no longer looked at him with contempt and disgust, but in awe. This was something he had never imagined before. Even when he followed Dean, he was rich, but people still looked at him with disgust because of his hair color and the radiation spots on his body. But now he didn't feel inferior because of the bright armor of the Knight of Light. Give up everything and follow him. Barton secretly asked himself, was it worth it? Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Dean also quietly stared at him. After a long time, Barton took a deep breath and seriously looked at Dean. I'm willing. Dean was startled. There was a trace of softness in his calm eyes, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. He calmly said, Really? Barton nodded. Really? Why? Because I said that I am willing to follow you for a lifetime. Although I am stupid, but at least I know that I must abide by my words. This is a promise. Barton said seriously. Dean was silent for a moment. Your choice is right. Barton revealed a smile, but then let out a sigh. Laughing bitterly, he said, To tell the truth, I don't know what I'm doing either. Am I crazy? How could I throw away such a good job and go crazy with you? But you were the one who gave me my life. The reason I was able to come here and join the Radiant Church was also because of you. So, although I'm a bit reluctant, I can't forget my roots, right? Dean stared at him for a moment, then slowly stood up and patted his shoulder. Barton grinned. You don't need to comfort me. We are brothers who have gone through life and death together. I'm sorry for making you lose your job. I'll make it up to you. In a few days, I'll find you a new job. I have given up such a job. I don't need to look for a new one. I will follow you. The new job is to be the Pope. Are you willing to do it? What? After leaving Barton's residence, Dean went to a nearby hotel. He saw Aisha sitting motionless in the room. He immediately went forward and whispered, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Aisha was silent. Dean held her slender cold hand and whispered, Let's go back now. I will accompany you. You won't be angry with me, right? Aisha looked at him without any expression. Dean looked up at her, his eyes full of tenderness. Let's go. He pulled her up from the bed, then carried the unconscious Boyce and left the hotel through the window. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon by the time they returned to the castle. Richelieu was monitored in the castle. He couldn't go out or send messages. When Dean came back, he immediately saw a familiar figure. When he saw the face, he felt the blood in his body freeze. His fingers trembled, and he felt a violent anger spreading from his chest. He stared at Dean and said, "What did you do to him?" "He is in a coma. He is not dead. Don't worry." Dean saw his reaction. "It seems that we didn't catch the wrong person." Richelieu immediately came to his senses, but he still felt an uncontrollable anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "He is just a child. I have already pledged my loyalty to you. Why don't you believe me? Why are you using a child to threaten me? In my eyes, he is just a bargaining chip. You." Richelieu clenched his fingers in anger. He suddenly thought a question. "How did you find him? Didn't you confess to the elder of the 9th region?" Dean indifferently said, "If you can betray others, then why can't others betray you?" Richelieu's face changed. "He won't betray me." "What did you do to him?" "I killed him." Dean was too lazy to play with him. "He was loyal to you." "I tortured him to death so that I could squeeze out your information bit by bit." "It's a pity." Richelieu roared, "You scum." Scum means the dregs of human beings. "Obviously, I am not one of them," Dudien calmly said. Richelieu roared, "With your skills, there are many ways to make him confess to me. Why did you have to kill him?" "Because it is efficient." "You." Richelieu gritted his teeth. He used to be a librarian. He never left the library. He didn't do anything bad in his life. "Why are you so cruel?" "Pigs didn't do anything bad." "Didn't they die?" Dean indifferently said. Richelieu was so angry that he couldn't speak. "Since you still have a benevolent heart, then cooperate with me in the future." Dean handed Boyce to Glenn. "Take him away. Personally look after him. This kid's strength is close to a senior hunter." Glenn was shocked as she looked at the child in her hand. How could such a small child have strength close to a senior hunter? Comparisons were odious. She finally understood the difference between those with a background and those without. She lost at the starting line from the moment she was born. Richelieu looked at Dean in anger. He knew that it was meaningless to be angry at this time. The more angry he was, the more he would fall into Dean's trap. He took a deep breath. "You have my life in your hands. If something happens, you can harvest my life at any time. Why are you doing this?" It's always good to add a few more sets of protection to the cards that are useful. Dean casually sat on the sofa. "Nothing will happen to you as long as you cooperate with me." "What are you angry about? Are you angry that you want to betray me, but you can't do anything about it?" Hearing this, Richelieu immediately suppressed the anger on his face and lowered his head. "No, I have never thought of betraying you." Dean waved his hand. "I don't want to talk nonsense. I have solved the 5 proctors. Tell me what to do next." Richelieu's heart skipped a beat as he raised his head in shock. Five proctors, all dead." Dean nodded. Richelieu's eyelids twitched slightly. He was shocked to the extreme. In less than a day, Dean had killed 5 proctors. This speed was simply like harvesting wheat. "I know." He suppressed the shock in his heart and took a deep breath. "I will fully cooperate with you so that your people can ascend to the position of Pope." When he was writing more than 3,000 words, he suddenly touched the keyboard. All the words were gone. Fortunately, he repeatedly retreated a few times and came out again. Phew. Chapter 633. Dean left the castle with Aisha after dinner. They went straight along the suburbs. Half an hour later, they came to the golden wall that had been built. He looked for a place with weak guards and jumped over the wall. He ran in a certain direction. Yvette was sitting alone in front of the white waterfall. The torrent of water splashed on the blue stone in front of her. Her eyes were blurred as she looked at the countless splashes of water. She was at a loss, but couldn't find the answer. After a long time, she heard footsteps behind her. She woke up with a start and looked back, only to see her personal maid walking out of the forest. "Your Highness." The maid was wearing a tiger skin coat. She respectfully said, "It's so late. Don't you want to go back and rest?" Yvette's tense nerves slowly relaxed. She looked at the broken water. "You go back first. I'll sit for a while." The maid looked at her. She wanted to say something, but stopped. She silently retreated into the forest. She didn't leave, but quietly waited for Yvette. The silver moon shined on the waterfall. There was a trace of chill in the air. Yvette was in a daze as she looked at the surging water. Suddenly a light sound came from the jungle behind her. It seemed that a stone had fallen from the tree. She was shocked and immediately turned her head to look. Immediately, she saw two slender figures slowly walking out from the dense forest. The shadows of the treetops faded away and revealed their faces. Yvette was stunned as she quietly touched the dagger on her waist. It was a nightmare that she hadn't seen for a long time. She felt suffocated and even forgot to breathe. "It's you?" Yvette looked at the boy. Dean quietly looked at her. "How are you? How did you get in?" "This is our forbidden area." Yvette's face slightly changed as she whispered, "How did you get in?" "I walked in." Dean answered her and then said, "It seems that you don't have a good time." Yvette immediately realized the purpose of his visit. There was a trace of alertness in her heart. She whispered, "I'm doing very well." Dean's eyes were indifferent as he said, "So, how is the matter that I gave you?" "It's still in progress." Yvette whispered, "Give me a little more time. I'm sure I'll be able to complete it." "Time is very precious. It's not something you can have." Dean said, "What stage have you completed? Have you become the king?" Yvette's expression changed slightly. "Not yet. We have to take it slow. We can't rush it. In other words, your father's still here? You still can't bear to kill him, right?" Dean's eyes were deep. "In fact, you don't need to kill him. You can force him to abdicate. As long as the goal is achieved, it's secondary to kill him." How could Yvette not know this? But she also knew that with her father's character, it was absolutely impossible to force him to abdicate the throne, and she could not do it. "Give me a little more time. I have already gotten my father's attention. According to what you said, I have performed very well. After a while, my father will pass the throne to me. I can't wait." Dean indifferently said, "Now you have two choices. First, become the king. I'll help you kill him and settle everything. You just need to listen to my instructions. Second, you and your father will die together." Yvette's eyes were moist. Why? Why are you forcing me like this?" "You're forcing me. I can help you persuade my father. Besides, you are so powerful. You can kidnap my father and make him listen to you. Why do you have to kill him?" Yvette growled with a face full of grief and indignation. Dean indifferently said, "I'm old and not afraid of death. It's not easy to kidnap someone. I need a person with ambition and desire who is easy to manage." Yvette looked at him in a daze. She suddenly understood that the boy in front of her was a devil, a cold-blooded and ruthless monster. Instead of begging for his forgiveness, it was better to think of other ways to fight for a glimmer of hope. She took a deep breath and said, "I can help you persuade my father. He will definitely listen to you. If you still don't want to, give me some time. Just one day. I want to try my method. There's no point in delaying." Dean coldly looked at her. "I'm very disappointed in you." "You?" Yvette's eyes were red from anger. "How many of your brothers and sisters dream of getting such an opportunity, but you don't know how to cherish it?" Dean said in a cold voice, "There are many people who are willing to do what you don't want to do." Yvette's face turned pale, and her voice trembled. "No, I beg you, don't do this. I really can't do it. I can listen to everything you say, but you wanted to kill my father. I really can't do it." "Then you will accompany your father." Dean slowly walked towards her. Yvette looked at him in horror. Her eyes were full of despair. She knew how powerful this youth was. She couldn't resist him with her own strength. You are so cruel and insane. Sooner or later you will get retribution." Yvette cursed in grief and indignation. "I have gotten all the retribution." Dean looked at her indifferently. "It turns out that cruelty and retribution have nothing to do with each other. It's like you refused me, so you died. If you were cruel and agreed with me, you would live a better life. Can this be considered retribution?" While talking, his big hand slowly stretched out. Yvette roared in grief and indignation as she waved the dagger towards Dean. Dean quickly turned his wrist and instantly knocked the dagger out of her hand. Then he lifted her body and pulled her in front of him. He grabbed her neck and twisted it. With a snap, Her head was broken, and she was silent. Dean slowly put down her body and threw her into the huge waterfall in front of him. Faith has harmed you, Dean muttered to himself. He slowly turned around and took Aisha's hand. They left the place. In a luxurious tent on the hill, Ayanlar was sitting on a table, burping and wiping his sword. This sword was obtained from a general he killed in the last wall battle. It was of first-class quality, much better than the weapons of the barbarians. The only drawback was that it looked good, but it wasn't durable. Chapter 634. Not a bad sword, a calm voice praised. Ayanlar was shocked and sobered up a lot. He turned around and saw two people wearing strange clothes. He had seen these strange clothes in the wall battle. They were the clothes of the people inside the wall. Assassin. Ayanlar narrowed his eyes, and a murderous look appeared on his face. How did you get in? Who was your spy? Unfortunately, I can't kill the person I want to kill the most. The sword is just scrap iron. Dadian indifferently said, Don't worry. I just want to make a deal with you. Deal? Ayanlar raised his eyebrows. Nonsense. Go to hell. He roared and rushed towards Dean with his sword. Dadian stretched out his fingers and pinched the tip of the sword. He pulled the tip of the sword and twisted it in the opposite direction. The sword was extremely elastic. It bent and stabbed towards Ayanlar. Ayanlar's pupils shrank as he retreated in a hurry. Dean quickly kicked Ayanlar's knee. The pain made Ayanlar's foot slide back, and he almost knelt down. Dean stretched out his hand and grabbed Ayanlar's neck. Although Ayanlar had a burly barbarian's body and was more than 2 meters tall, he was squatting in front of Dean. It was difficult for him to resist as his vital parts were restricted. Now can we talk? Dadian asked. Ayanlar's face was full of shock, and his heart was in turmoil. But more than that, he was terrified. He never thought that, with his strength, he would be subdued by someone in a single exchange. It should be known that he wasn't drunk, nor was he careless. It was just that his opponent was too strong. Whether it was in terms of strength or speed, they both far surpassed him. Talk. Talk about what? Ayanlar said reluctantly. He suddenly noticed that the commotion caused by the battle here did not alarm the attendants outside. Could it be? Dadian indifferently said, I know you. You're one of the best princes. You want to be the king of barbarians, right? Ayanlar's face turned ugly. How do you know about me? Who told you? Your sister, Yvette. Her? I knew this damn bitch was up to no good. Ayanlar clenched his fists angrily. Dean glanced at him. In a way, she is better than you. Ayanlar looked up at him. He did not dare to refute, but he was furious. I came to you today, mainly to help you achieve your wish. Dadian said. Ayanlar was startled. He widened his eyes and said, Help me fulfill my wish? You want me to? Your reaction is not slow. Good. Dean praised, but there was no smile on his face. Ayanlar's eyes were full of shock as he thought of something. He looked at Dean suspiciously. Are you sent by my father to test me? If that's the case, isn't this method a little too weak? Dadian indifferently said, If your father had my help then, he would have been able to break through the wall in one fell swoop. Ayanlar was startled. He knew that Dean wasn't bragging. With the help of such a person, he only needed to sneak into the wall and assassinate a few leaders of the military. It would play a great role in the war. I'll fulfill your wish if you want to be the king, but you have to listen to me. Dadian indifferently said. Ayanlar's heart sank, and his eyes flickered. He knew that if he agreed, he would only be a puppet even if he stepped onto the throne. But if he did not agree, he would most likely not have a good ending. It was better to deal with it first. I promise you, he said. Dadian nodded. Then kill your father, and the throne will be yours. Ayanlar was stunned. He hastily said, Isn't this a little too rash? You don't want to? Yes, of course I want to. Ayanlar smiled bitterly and said, But my father is always protected by someone. I can't even get close to him, and I can't even bring a weapon when I go to see him. I can't kill him at all. If I could, I would have. I'll help you. Dadian said, Come with me. Ayanlar thought of something. Elder, please wait. I'm afraid that I won't be able to ascend the throne, even if you help me kill my father. My other brothers are very strong. If my father dies, then no one will suppress them. I'm afraid that I won't be able to seize the throne with my current strength. Which brother do you think is a threat? I'll help you kill him. Dudian said. Ionlar was stunned. After a long time, he finally reacted and exclaimed in surprise, Can it really be done? Yes. Good. Ionlar was excited as he nodded. In the dusky night, there was a sudden ringing of a bell on the hill. At the same time, a fire ignited the lampstand, and the flames burned a few tenths of the barbarian royal family. Cries, shouts, flames, and killings intertwined in the night. The entire hill was thrown into chaos. It was only when the sky began to brighten that the hill regained its peace. Only the smoke from the burning tents drifted into the distance. Ionlar was holding a sword in his hand. He was wearing a majestic armor, and the tip of his sword was pointed at the neck of a beautiful and dignified woman. He said coldly, Mother, where's the Beast King's badge? Even if you don't tell me, I will find it sooner or later. The woman looked at him with grief and indignation. Kill me. Even if you kill me, you won't get it. You bastard. Father is dead. I'm the king of the barbarians. Don't force me. Ionlar said angrily. King? Bah, you bastard. I shouldn't have given birth to you. I should have strangled you in the cradle if I knew this day would come. The woman's eyes were red with anger. There were dried tears on her face. She looked at Ionlar. She didn't fear the sword on her neck. Iamlar's gaze was gloomy. He took a deep breath and said, Mother, you forced me to do this. As he spoke, he turned around and shouted, Bring me here. Yes. One of the trusted attendants responded and turned to leave. Soon, he returned with 3 children of 7 or 8 years old, their hands and feet bound with iron chains. They were 2 boys and 1 girl, all of whom were wearing high-grade animal clothing. Mother, brother, one of the girls was scared. She looked at her mother, who was sitting in the ruins, and her brother, who was holding a bloody sword. She was at a loss. When the woman saw the 3 children tied up, she rushed forward to hug them, but was stopped by Iamlar's sword. Mother, I'll give you 3 minutes to think about it. If you don't speak, I'll kill them. I'll kill 1 every minute. Do as you see fit. Iamlar's eyes were cold. He turned and waved at his servant. The servant next to him understood. He immediately grabbed one of the boys and put the sword on his neck. The woman saw this and shouted angrily, Let him go! Let him go! How dare you touch the royal family? Do you want to die? The servant's expression changed slightly. He looked at Ionlar. Ionlar looked at his mother coldly and said, Speak. 1 minute is almost up. The woman looked at him angrily. Your father loved you so much. Why did you do such a crazy thing? Even if you didn't do it, your father would have passed the throne to you. Why did you do such a stupid thing? How do I know? Now he is dead. Don't make it sound so nice. Iamlar's eyes were cold as he said, Time is up. He waved his hand. Seeing this, his trusted aide stretched out his palm, and with a poochy sound, the sharp sword immediately pierced the boy's neck. Blood flowed out, and the boy didn't even have time to scream before he fell to the ground, dead. Iamlar's eyes were deep and cold. Mother, are you still not going to speak? The woman stared blankly at the boy on the ground. Her mind went blank. After a while, she slowly came back to her senses. She raised her head to look at the burly son that she was once proud of. At this moment, she felt so unfamiliar. She was startled for a moment. Suddenly, she noticed the 2 people wearing strange clothes standing behind her son. She immediately thought of the scene of these 2 people killing the generals who came to guard the place. She felt a chill in her heart and an indescribable anger. She said with a trembling voice, Did you do this because you listened to their instructions? Are they the people inside the wall? You actually colluded with the people inside the wall and killed your father and brother. You... Chapter 635. You are crazy. The woman was so angry that she couldn't speak. If this is crazy, then I would have been crazy a long time ago. Ionlar said indifferently, It's been 2 minutes, dear mother. You've killed another one of your children. As he spoke, he raised his hand slightly. His trusted aide understood and grabbed one of the girls. His dagger fiercely pierced through the back of the girl's neck. A blood-curdling scream came to an abrupt end, and the girl's corpse fell to the ground like a withered flower. The woman was stunned for a moment. She rushed towards Ianlar and hysterically roared, "I'm going to kill you!" Ianlar frowned slightly. He flicked his wrist, and the sharp sword shot out like a silver light. With a puff, it pierced through the woman's chest. The woman's body stiffened, and she coughed out a mouthful of blood. She raised her head in disbelief and stared at Ianlar, whose expression was as cold as ice. Endless despair and sorrow slowly surged out of her eyes. "Why did you force my hands to be stained with blood?" Ianlar looked at her silently and said in a low voice. She exerted strength in her wrist and pulled the sword back. Blood splattered everywhere and landed on the scorched ground. It was a ghastly sight. The woman's body fell down like a beautiful butterfly, completely motionless. Dean's eyes flashed with killing intent. He clenched his fingers in his sleeves, but after a moment he slowly loosened them. He looked at Ianlar. "How will you rule the barbarians if you kill her?" Ianlar put the sword back in his scabbard and turned to look at Dean. "My father and mother are dead. My brothers and sisters have been beheaded by you. This place is under our complete control. Our people are everywhere. As long as we block the news and ask the prophet to recommend me to ascend to the throne, it doesn't matter if we find the Beast King card or not. I can forge one, and anyone who dares to verify it will die." Dean stared at him for a moment and nodded. "It seems that I didn't choose the wrong person." Ianlar smiled. "It's the right choice for you to choose me. From now on, I'm the only king. If there is anything you need me to do, then just tell me." Dean deeply looked at him. "You don't have to worry about this. What I need you to do will only be good for you and all of your clansmen. There will be no harm." "Oh." Iamlar's eyes slightly moved. "I'll come back to you after you have stabilized your position," Dean said in a cold voice. "Prepare the troops in 3 to 5 days. I'll give you an area inside the wall for you to live in. You don't have to live in this barren place anymore." "Really?" Iamlar's eyes lit up, but he was skeptical in his heart. Dean didn't want to stay any longer. He took Aisha's cold hand and left along the mountain that was covered with the flames of war and corpses. The faint smile on Iamlar's face disappeared as he looked at Dean and Aisha's disappearing figures. His eyes were cold and gloomy. "Your Majesty, we have taken control of all the troops on the mountain. Do you want to send someone to take them down?" The servant next to him said. Ianlar coldly glanced at him. "Can't you see how strong he is? He alone can slaughter all the royal family members. Who can stop him? My father's subordinate, Lord Netherworld, was beheaded by him." The attendant was shocked and said, This person inside the wall is so powerful." Ianlar coldly snorted. "It's getting late. Immediately send the order to block the entire mountain. Don't let anyone leave. In addition, immediately call someone to bring the prophet." "Yes." The servant looked at the corpses on the ground. "Your Majesty, should we deal with them?" Upon hearing that, Ianlar glanced at his mother on the ground, as well as the corpses of his 2 younger siblings, as well as his other brother, whose face was pale and terrified. He was silent for a moment before he said in a low voice, "Call a few people over and carry them away. Don't destroy my mother's body. I still have a use for her." "Yes." Dean held Aisha's hand as they walked in the wilderness and returned to the wall. The green grass and fragrance along the way made him slow down his pace. He turned to Haisha and said, "Do you remember the first time we met on the grassland outside the giant wall?" Aisha was silent. "I was hunting a monster at that time. Can you remember?" "Forget it. It doesn't matter if you can't remember now. You will remember it sooner or later." The 2 walked in the wilderness and gradually returned to the front of the golden wall. Dean looked up at the light coming from the direction of the wall. He sighed and led Aisha to find a place with weak guards. They climbed over the wall and walked all the way back to the castle. Nicotine looked at Dean as he saw him come back. "Master, I've prepared everything. What should we do next?" "Set up the factory and make the finished products. I'll give you the production process." Dean sat on the sofa and drank the tea. "I'll send a few great potion masters from the Dark Church to assist you. You just need to find a place to build the factory. If you don't have enough money, then go to Noise. He will be responsible for the funds. Great potion masters from the Dark Church. Nicotine was speechless. Noise could cause a sensation by stomping his feet. But now it seemed that he could only be Dean's subordinate. Noise looked at Dean. I'll be responsible for the funds? Dean nodded. If you don't, then hurry up and learn. You will be in charge of the finances in the future. You will be in charge of the money of the 12 districts of the Dark Church, as well as the Holy Church and the various chambers of commerce. If you don't understand, then go to Hawkeye. He will introduce you to some excellent financial managers to teach you. Noise couldn't believe it. Finance was the lifeblood of the Holy Church. How could Dean hand over such an important thing to him? Moreover, it wasn't just a little money. It was almost all the money of the entire outer wall. It could be said that he would be the richest person in the entire outer wall in the future. I know. I'll learn right away. Noise hurriedly said. He was so excited that he wanted to shout out loud. He suddenly thought of what would happen when he returned to his family. What were the expressions of the people who had despised him when he was in prison? Thinking of this, he could not help but feel a little excited, secretly determined to learn financial management at all costs. Nicotine was jealous as he saw Dean hand over such an important matter to Noise, but he didn't dare to show it. He felt bitter and regretful. He thought that if he didn't betray Dean and was loyal to him, then perhaps he would be the one to manage the finances for Dean. After all, he was a butler, so he was the most suitable person to manage the finances. Moreover, managing the finances was just the surface. What made him jealous was that it meant that Noise would be Dean's right-hand man. It was important to know that money was indispensable. Dean gave this person to Noise, which meant that he would put him in an important position in the future. Moreover, according to Dean's current plan, he knew that this was a road of no return. Either he would fail and die, and they would be buried together with him, or he would succeed and become the top class of people. Young master, where do we sell the finished products? Nicotine collected his thoughts and lowered his head to ask. Dean indifferently replied, make them first and don't rush to sell them. The more the better. I understand, Nicholas said respectfully. Master, Sergei came down from upstairs and saw Dean in the living room. Richelieu wants to see you. Dean frowned. I'll be there in a minute. After that, he said to Nicotine, come to my study later. I have a list for you to help me buy some materials. Yes, Nicholas replied respectfully. Dean went upstairs and came to the room where Richelieu lived. Sergei stood at the door and opened the door for Dean. After entering the room, Dean saw Richelieu sitting on the ground with a haggard face. There was a trace of decadence in his aura. Dean indifferently said, you can change your clothes here. You don't need to wear such a heavy robe. Richelieu rushed forward as he saw Dean appear. Didn't we agree before that I'm completely loyal to you? Why didn't the antidote you gave me cure the poison? How can you break your promise? Dean indifferently said as he saw the red marks on Richelieu's arm. I was afraid that you would be disobedient, so I injected you with a strong poison. It completely mixed with your blood. You need to take the antidote a few more times if you want to cure it completely. Richelieu hurriedly said, then give me the antidote. First, write down the names of all the cardinals in the Holy Church and their families, and then I'll consider how much to give you. Dean calmly sat down. Richelieu hesitated for a moment, but quickly returned to the table. He picked up a pen and paper and started to write. For him, he had exposed other deeper secrets to Dean, so he didn't lack this information. Moreover, with Dean's means, he didn't need to go through Richelieu to know these things. It was just a matter of time. So it wasn't a top-secret information. Soon, the information was written and handed to Dean. Dean nodded to Sergei as he looked at Sergei. Sergei went to Dudyan's basement and took out the mulberry leaf cigarette. Richelieu was impatient as he saw the cigarette in Sergei's hand. Sergei wanted to dodge, but the cigarette in his hand disappeared. He couldn't help but be aghast and shocked. Dean quietly looked at Richelieu as he lit the cigarette. He slowly got up and said to Sergei, let's go out. Dean closed the door and looked at Sergei. What happened to the Mel family? Master, I have tortured them according to your instructions. The two women are on the verge of collapse. They asked me for the antidote, just like the Pope. Sergei replied truthfully. Dean nodded. Give them the antidote every day, only when they abandon their dignity and beg. Sergei looked at Dean. Master, are you going to torture them for revenge? If they submit, they can set an example for the other nobles and submit to us. Du Jian's eyes were calm. These aristocrats didn't learn anything else, but they learned all the problems of the aristocracy. They are arrogant and arrogant. It is difficult to tame them by force alone. They're a good example. No matter how down the Mel family is, their prestige is still there. They represent the pride of all aristocrats. Sergei suddenly realized and said, I know. Dean patted him on the shoulder and let him continue to guard here. He went back to his study and wrote down the materials needed to build a high-voltage lightning fortress. The reason why he was ready to replace Richelieu as the pontiff after 7 days wasn't because of the difficulty of the task, but because he wanted to make time to make his own cards as soon as possible. Although he had Aisha's help, which was stronger than his original plan, but there were many strong people in the inner wall. He couldn't fully count on Aisha's strength. Time passed. The sun rose and set. The outside world continued to expose the sensational news in the outer wall as Dudian closed his door to build the lightning fortress. For example, there was a scuffle in a certain block. It was suspected that there was a war between the Dark Believers and other pagans. There were many casualties. A powerful aristocratic family suddenly announced that it was leaving the consortium. Countless people were laid off and unemployed. There were shadows of barbarians at the border. It was suspected that there would be a war. The news shocked the entire outer wall every day. Many nobles and military officials were aware that there was an amazing change happening in the outer wall. It seemed that there was a very fierce undercurrent surging in the inner wall. They didn't know when it would erupt. The 7th day arrived in the blink of an eye. Dean looked at Richelieu, who had been locked up in the study room for the past few days. Richelieu's face was obviously yellow and old. Are you ready? The corner of Richelieu's mouth twitched slightly, as though he had lost all strength. He said in a low voice, I've been prepared for a long time. I'm ready. Chapter 636. Sooner or later we will have to face it. Why should we be afraid? Dudian indifferently said, Get ready. Richelieu deeply looked at him and bowed his head. Yes. Whoosh. A snow pigeon landed on the windowsill of Carvey's study. Carvey was recording the secret activities of the 3rd area of the Dark Church in recent days. He was waiting for the Pope to return. He frowned when he saw the sudden arrival of the snow pigeon. He stopped writing and took the scroll from the foot of the snow pigeon. He slowly rubbed the scroll and looked at it. After a moment, his pupils shrank and he cried out in amazement. Pass the throne? Promote a little apprentice knight? The small characters on the scroll were real. After a moment, Carvey slowly recovered. He felt that it was unbelievable. He even felt that someone had secretly borrowed this communication channel or replaced the letter. Let's verify it first, he thought in his heart. He immediately took out a new piece of paper and started to write. On the other side, the famous poet Anthony was drinking and explaining the difference between classical and modern poetry to his 2 proud students. Suddenly, his eyebrows twitched and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He calmly stopped his lecture and said, Today's class is over. Go back and think about what the teacher said. Remember, emotions are not the only thing about poetry. Poetry not only has praise, but it also has criticism. Most importantly, poetry must have dignity. Yes, teacher. The 2 students respectfully got up and left. After the 2 students left, Anthony indifferently said, Sir, come out. A figure shrouded in a black robe slowly walked out from the shadows behind the room. His body seemed to be filled with a vague mist, making it difficult to see his face and figure. He laughed in a low voice. Master has implanted a hunter's eye. His perception is really not comparable to ordinary people. I dare not, Anthony indifferently said. Sir is the master. You flatter us. We only know how to do what you call evil. We can't be compared to a great poet like you. The black robe figure laughed. Today I came to find you mainly because the Holy Church has given you a task. I hope you must complete it by today. What mission? Antonia frowned. The black-robed figure said in a low voice, as usual, still writing poems. This time, it's a poem in praise of an apprentice knight of the Light Vatican. His name is Barton. Eulogizing an apprentice knight? Antonia was a little surprised. And one from the Holy Church? When did the Dark Church become so kind? He pondered for a moment and said, Is there anything special about this person? There's nothing special about him. He's just a normal person. The black-robed figure said slowly. However, his identity is not ordinary. He is about to ascend the throne and become the new pope. A new pope? Antonia stood up abruptly from his chair and looked at the black-robed figure in shock. You're saying that Richelieu is going to abdicate? How is this possible? How could this happen so suddenly? It is very sudden, which is why I need you to compose a eulogy for the new pope to make everything seem more natural, the black-robed figure said. Anthony was startled. He suddenly realized something. His heart was filled with a chill. Is it possible that the Dark Church is the one who planned the change of the pope? How is this possible? This is not something you should know. You should think about how to write a good eulogy. The black-robed figure said coldly. Write it and give it to the Rice Chamber of Commerce. They will print it for you as soon as possible. Rice Chamber of Commerce? Antonia's face slightly changed. Although he didn't have a deep relationship with the Dark Church, but he knew that the Rice Chamber of Commerce was controlled by the Dark Church. In other words, this matter was completely planned by the Dark Church. It was hard for him to imagine how the Dark Church could suddenly get involved in the change of the Pope. It must be known that the Holy Church had been suppressing the Dark Church for so many years. Otherwise, the Dark Church wouldn't have been forced to hide in the dark. After all, the process of hiding was very painful for many dark believers. They were hunted everywhere and could only live alone in a dark place. Moreover, it was very inconvenient. This also led to many dark believers becoming more and more eccentric the longer they joined the Dark Church. However, the Dark Church had directly controlled the heart of the Holy Church. This was simply unimaginable. He couldn't imagine what would happen to the outer wall in the future if the Holy Church was controlled by the Dark Church. Would it be chaos or destruction when the light was mixed with the darkness? His mind was a little confused. Soon, the words of the black-robed figure interrupted his thoughts. One more thing. At noon, the List Chamber of Commerce will send someone to interview you. During the interview, please support the new Pope, Mr. Barton. He is a great leader. I hope you can keep this in mind. Antonia came back to his senses. His facial expression kept changing. He knew that the other party wanted him to remember this sentence. He wanted him to praise the new Pope in the interview around this core sentence. He could not say anything else that would cause people to think of negative things. This interview was just for show. Even if he didn't say, so the newspaper would speak for him. I know. He slightly bowed his head. The morning sun shone down from the slopes of Utopia Mountain. The warm light dispelled the darkness and chill that shrouded countless buildings. Newspaper delivery boys rode fast horses as they delivered newspapers to households. Some were aristocratic manors, some were rich people's courtyards, and some were exquisite huts. They delivered newspapers from the bustling areas of the outer wall to the suburbs and then to the towns and villages. The newspaper delivery men from the various newspaper companies were like ants, shuttling ceaselessly on the streets, carrying the news. A farmer was enjoying a leisurely breakfast as he drank his steaming soup, ate his cheese bread, and flipped through the morning paper at 7:30 a.m. However, the moment he opened the newspaper, he was stunned. His eyes widened, and he forgot to swallow the soup in his mouth. The soup almost flowed down the corner of his mouth as he stared at the headline on the newspaper with his mouth wide open. The news was written on the largest page of the newspaper. Mr. Richelieu, the 9th Pope of the Holy Church, will inherit the position of Pope. The new Pope will take charge. The farmer was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. He hurriedly continued reading, and after a while, he finished reading the entire newspaper. The soup was no longer hot, and the cheese bread beside it was cold. but he had completely forgotten about it. He was lost in thought. After all, the matter of the replacement of the Pope was a huge matter even for an ordinary citizen like him. In addition to spreading faith and building shrines, the Luminous Church was also in charge of land division, as well as some land taxes, asylum tax, and so on. The so-called asylum tax was something that everyone had to pay. Even the commoners in the common district were no exception, unless they were so poor that they ended up in the slums and became refugees. The asylum tax included a lot of things, such as the invasion of the Dark Believers, the invasion of monsters outside the giant wall, and so on. But it didn't include the invasion of beasts. This was the responsibility of the military. Therefore, these taxes may change if the Pope was replaced. This had happened in the past when the Pope was replaced. The biggest change was after the sixth Pope took office. He increased the asylum tax by 10% in one fell swoop. This made the civilians miserable. Fortunately, the Pope was killed by the Dark Believers in less than 10 years. It was one of the few times in history when many people were grateful to the Dark Believers. The new Pope. The farmer looked worried. This year's harvest was not good. If the new Pope raised the tax, then the burden on his family would be heavy. He might even have to face the situation of firing the serfs. As the morning newspaper was sent out, exclamations were heard from the various manors. The sudden news caught everyone off guard. They didn't expect the change of the Pope to be so sudden. Although such a sudden change had happened in history, but not many times. Was there something wrong with the body of the previous Pope? For a time, countless people speculated. At the same time, they were full of curiosity about the identity of the new Pope. In a room in the headquarters of the trials, Ferrat stared at the newspaper in his hand. He read it over and over again, reading every word carefully. Only when there was no possibility of a mistake did he slowly put down the newspaper. With a loud bang, he slammed the newspaper on the table, his eyes almost spitting fire. "Damn you, Richelieu! What the hell are you doing? Sir, why didn't you inform us that the Pope is abdicating his position? Did he suddenly get a bad disease?" An old man wearing a priest's robe asked in confusion. Ferrat tightened his grip on the newspaper and said, "With his vigilance, do you think he will contract a disease? The old guy cherishes his life the most. The doctors around him are the best in the outer wall. If he had a bad disease, then they would have already found it. Then why did he suddenly abdicate?" The old priest was even more puzzled. Is his life coming to an end? No. As far as I know, he should be able to live for more than 100 years. Ferrat said coldly, "We'll have to ask this old thing to know. Damn it, I don't know where he's hiding now. I heard that he was attacked by assassins before. Someone infiltrated the higher-ups of the Vatican, so he disappeared. I didn't expect that his disappearance would cause such a big commotion." The old priest was startled. Did someone kidnap him and force him to abdicate? Fay narrowed his eyes. There is such a possibility, but it is unlikely. The old guy's strength is much stronger than the great Light King. The old priest was stunned. Immediately inform the presiding judge of the branches. Make sure that they send out all of their people to find this old guy. Fay's eyes were cold. I want to see why he suddenly abdicated. Yes. At the same time, in the Hall of Knights, the 9 elders who had once received the title of Legendary Knight had all gathered in the conference hall. Elora looked at them and said, "Everyone, Richelieu is about to abdicate. This is too sudden. Who knows where he is now? Great Elder, this matter is too sudden. It is normal if ordinary people didn't get the news, but we didn't get any news in advance. Is there something fishy going on?" Another person said, "Yes. In my opinion, Richelieu made such a decision because of a plan and purpose. We have to guard against it. Yes, in recent years, Holy Church has been oppressing the Knights Hall more and more. If we didn't have the support of the nobles, then we would have suffered a big loss. However, I'm sure you all know about the new rules of the Light Curia 5 years ago. Any noble who joins the Light Curia can pass the examination unconditionally. Moreover, they can become an official Knight of Light in about 3 years. If they perform well, they can advance even faster. This rule is obviously to snatch the power of the nobles away from us." Holy Church has a lot of tricks up their sleeves. I wonder if they have the cooperation of the military this time. Alora listened to everyone and was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We must find Richelieu before noon today. Also, immediately investigate the background of the new pope. Leave the investigation of the new pope to me." One of the elders said, "All right." Alora nodded. After a while, the meeting ended. The crowd gradually dispersed. The elder who had suggested investigating the new pope left the Knight's Hall and went straight to his castle. Once he entered the castle, he went upstairs to his room. Just as he opened the door, he saw a figure in a black robe and mask sitting on the sofa in the middle of his room. The figure was enjoying a cup of tea and had his legs crossed. There was a black scorpion tattoo on his wrist. Someone who dared to carve a tattoo on such an obvious place was either a careless rookie or extremely confident. How did the meeting go? The black-robed figure tilted his head to look at the elder who had just entered and asked with a smile. The elder saw how relaxed he was and was slightly taken aback. His face darkened and he said, "This is my home. You better be careful. If someone sees me, I will be exposed." "Don't worry." The black-robed figure smiled and said, "If someone comes near, I will know without opening the door." The elder knew his ability, but he still felt that his attitude made him unhappy. He frowned slightly and did not pursue the matter further. He sat on the other side of the sofa and said, everyone else also felt that the change of pope was too sudden. There was no prior news, and they thought that there was some kind of plan behind it. So, everyone is currently investigating and preparing to find Richelieu's whereabouts. Yes, this is within the expectations of our Lord. The black-robed figure nodded slightly. The elder's eyes moved, and he asked, "Who is that, Lord?" Chapter 637. It's him. The old man was surprised. Does Richelieu's disappearance have anything to do with him? This isn't something you should know. The black-robed man's voice was cold. What did they say in today's meeting? What are they going to do? Will they contact the inner wall? The old man frowned. Our Knight's Hall has always adhered to the principle of fairness and justice. Although this matter is a bit strange, but they wouldn't contact the inner wall to intervene in the affairs of the outer wall. This would disrupt the structure of the outer wall. They are only looking for Richelieu and ask him about the situation. I think they suspect that Richelieu is dead or has been kidnapped. Oh, the black-robed man chuckled. The old man's face turned gloomy. What do you mean by, oh? I didn't think that the thoughts of the old guys in the Knight's Hall would have been predicted by the Lord. The black-robed man chuckled. If you contact the forces of the inner wall, then you might be able to pick up a bargain. Unfortunately, you missed such a good opportunity. It's no wonder that the Knight's Hall is declining day by day. In today's era, who would abide by the so-called chivalry except for those civilians who have no way to climb up? The old man's expression changed slightly. His eyes flickered as he said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll tell them about this? Do you dare?" The black-robed man smiled as he looked at the old man. The old man looked at him. "I'm cooperating with you because I'm grateful to you. Why wouldn't I dare if it's about the life and death of countless people in the outer wall? Then you can try." The black-robed man didn't care about the old man's angry expression. "Don't forget what you've done. Your family, your children, grandchildren, and all your friends will be burned at the stake if it's exposed. There are more than one legendary knight who colluded with the Dark Church. You know better than me what happened to them." The old man clenched his fists and said with a cold look in his eyes, "This is the last time I'll cooperate with you. From today onwards, I hope you won't come looking for me again. Even if you do, I won't cooperate with you anymore. I can't sell my soul to the devil anymore. You devil disciples will go to hell after you die and be entangled by the eternal dark chain for generations to come, never to be purified." Eternal dark chain? The black-robed man chuckled and said, "This is a fiction in the Holy Bible of the Light Church. We don't believe it. We only believe that darkness will never be extinguished. Only darkness is the most real world. Look at you knights. How hypocritical and pitiful. You can insult me, but don't insult the pure glory of a knight." The old man said angrily, "If you don't want to expose yourself, you better keep your voice down. The old man suppressed the anger in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said coldly, "Since you're here to talk, please leave immediately after you're done." The black-robed man smiled faintly and said, "All right, you've talked for so long in the meeting. Is this all you've said? There's one more thing." The old man said coldly, "They're preparing to investigate the background of the new pope, but I've taken care of this matter. You should know the background of this new pope, right? What's his background? Nothing much. He's just a small apprentice knight." The black-robed man said calmly, "No background, no noble blood, and no power. To tell you the truth, this person is just a puppet supported by His Excellency. The real pope is His Excellency." The old man was stunned. His eyes were filled with intense shock. "Isn't he your chairman? Could it be that Richelieu has really been kidnapped by him? How did he manage to get his location? What is Richelieu thinking?" The black-robed man smiled at him and said, "Are you questioning His Excellency?" The old man's face slightly changed. He bowed his head and said no, although he didn't have a good impression of the black-robed man, but he didn't dare to offend His Excellency. His Excellency was able to subdue 12 elders of the Dark Church in one night. He couldn't afford to provoke him. Moreover, the Holy Church and the Dark Church and the outer wall would fall under the control of one person. In time to come, that person would completely dominate the outer wall. He couldn't afford to offend such a person. The black-robed man smiled. "You just said that you've done a good job. You've saved us a lot of trouble. I hope you can cover up the background of the new pope. Just cover it up for the time being. When the new pope ascends to the throne, we'll need you to show your support and add glory to the new pope. With your legendary knight medal and identity, as well as your past glory and authority, your support will definitely reduce the doubts." The old man was surprised. "I'll openly support him? Do you want to expose me?" The black-robed man slightly waved his hand. "Don't get too excited. His Excellency said that you'll become the Lord of the Knights Hall soon after the new pope ascends to the throne. Isn't this your dream? You'll be the most respected knight in the outer wall. You'll be the existence that all the nobles' knights yearn for and pursue. You'll be a legend that they worship. Your name will be engraved in the history books. Don't you want such glory?" The old man was stunned. In fact, the black-robed man didn't need to say so many tempting words. He already knew what kind of glory it would be based on the condition of becoming the Lord of the Knights Hall. This was the pursuit of all knights. He calmed down after a moment. "Don't use your tempting words on me. Knight's glory is obtained by abiding by the knight's spirit, not by betraying your comrades. You're the devil. You can't give me glory. You can only give me shame." The black-robed man's eyebrows twitched as he looked at the old man with interest. The black-robed man raised his eyebrows and looked at him with interest. He clapped his hands and said, "Not bad, not bad. No wonder you're a legendary knight. You're really determined. However, this is not empty talk. It's the truth. It's also what that Lord told me to tell you. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. I don't think that Lord has any reason to lie to you. After all, you have to do this unless you want everything you've done to be exposed. If that's the case, your knight's spirit and the knight's medal will be destroyed. Even the Knight's Hall won't allow someone like you to stay, right?" The old man was startled. Cold sweat oozed from his forehead as he clenched his fists. "You're ruthless. It's good that you agree." The black-robed man got up. "I'll leave the matter of covering up the true identity of the new pope to you. If there are other tasks, I'll come back to convey to you. The situation is turbulent, so don't stand on the wrong side. If you stand on the eliminated team, then you'll be miserable," the old man snorted. "You don't need to talk too much." "That's good." "Huh. Will the Holy Church be able to get past the matter of you suddenly replacing the Pope?" The old man stared at him. "Even if Richelieu agrees to abdicate, but those cardinals won't be easy to deal with. You don't need to worry about that. We have launched the highest level plan, the Dark Moon Plan." The black-robed man waved his hand. "Don't forget that the hotter the sun is, the deeper the shadow is." The old man was startled. At the same time, an emergency meeting was held in the military headquarters of the Western region. Many prominent generals had arrived. The replacement of the Holy Church's pontiff was undoubtedly the biggest issue in the outer wall. For them, This was more serious than the barbarians invading the border. Chapter 638. Sandro was sitting in the master's seat in the main hall of the Ryan family's castle. He was drinking tea and reading newspapers. 7 or 8 maids were waiting in the main hall. If Dudian was here, he would find that the once humble Ryan castle had become magnificent and luxurious. There were no more than a dozen maids and knights in the castle. Now, there were dozens of maids, and they were all over the corridors. There were more than 200 or 300 knights patrolling outside the manor. It was a symbol of status for the aristocracy. It was no less important than money. These knights were the legal private military force of the aristocracy. The number of knights often determined the strength of the aristocracy. At the same time, the town where the Ryan family was located was not the same as before. 4 or 5 farms and pastures have been developed in the mountains outside the town, which were managed by the Ryan family. The food produced was enough to feed all the knights and their squires, as well as servants in the castle. New Pope. Sandro's leisurely expression froze when he saw the news on the newspaper. He quickly put down his crossed legs, opened the newspaper, and read it carefully. After a moment, his face showed a shocked expression. The Pope is going to abdicate? The new Pope is such a big event. How come there was no news in advance? Did the Holy Church block the news? He was in a daze for a long time before he slowly reacted. He frowned and fell into deep thought. If the new Pope ascends to the throne, I don't know if the rule that the nobles can be selected as Knights of Light without taking the test will be changed. It seems that I have to get Jasmine and the others to join the Light Curia as soon as possible. If this rule is abolished, it will be difficult to join again. The butler nodded and went downstairs. Sandro looked out of the window. He was a middle-aged man. There was a trace of worry in his eyes as he looked into the distance. I hope nothing big will happen. There were 12 figures sitting in the hall of the Fillen family. They were the elders of the 12th district. The elder who was killed by Dean had been replaced by someone else. A black-haired teenager and a slender woman were sitting in the hall. The hall was silent. There seemed to be a palpitating force shrouding everyone's body. Dean looked at Fillen, who was the patriarch of the Fillen family. General Fillen, please take a seat. Fillen Cox was flattered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An attendant immediately ran up and offered a seat. Dean looked at him. The loyalty of Fillen family to the Dark Church didn't happen overnight. Their ancestors had been loyal to the Dark Church. The most respected female general was a member of the Dark Church. She had killed countless barbarians with the secret help of the Dark Church. Therefore, the Fillen family had been working for the Dark Church for generations. They were the biggest chess piece of the Dark Church in the military. This was one of the reasons why the Dark Church held an elder meeting in the Fillen family. I'm sure everyone knows about the Dark Moon plan. Dean looked at the 12 elders and said in a cold voice, "The Dark Church and the Holy Church will be united as one after the new Pope ascends to the throne. We will be in charge of the Holy Church in the future. You don't have to live in the dark anymore. I believe that the military and magistrate will submit to us once the Holy Church falls into our hands." He said we instead of me. It was just a word difference, but many people secretly noticed it, although they didn't know whether it was intentional or unintentional. But there was a trace of excitement and expectation in their hearts. All of this is due to the efforts of the president. I will listen to any orders from the president. One of the strong men said in a sonorous voice. Everyone was in awe of Dean because they were afraid of him. But now they had more faith and expectation. After all, once the new pope ascends to the throne in a short period of time, the Holy Church won't be the opponent of the Dark Church, but the servant of the Dark Church. They had been suppressed by the Holy Church for a long time. This kind of thing was only occasionally thought about in their dreams. They didn't dare to think about it at ordinary times. But now it would become a reality. How could they not be excited? Dean nodded. The civilians don't know enough about the new pope. I hope that you will implement the Dark Moon plan in full. In addition to the highest core chess pieces, there is no need to hide the chess pieces that we have placed in other forces. Now is the time for them to play their role. Elder, these civilians don't know anything about the new pope. Can we rely on their words alone? Someone asked in a worried tone. Don't underestimate the power of authority, Dean said in a cold voice. There was a very good example. A deacon of a magistrate didn't investigate in detail and easily judged a case. He said that the defendant was guilty. He said that the wrong person was really guilty. No one would believe that a deacon would judge a wrong case. This is the power of authority. The person who spoke before was silent. Elder, will we be able to rule the entire outer wall after the Holy Church falls into our hands? A young man who had replaced the Night King, one of the three kings, asked in an expectant tone. Dean indifferently glanced at him. The other forces aren't fools. They haven't acted yet because they aren't sure. Sooner or later, they will know that the Holy Church is under our control after the new pope succeeds the throne. Don't forget that they will have their eyes and chess pieces in the Holy Church and us. Everyone looked at each other as they heard the words. Dean raised his hand to suppress the commotion. You don't have to doubt each other. The outer wall will fall into our hands sooner or later. It's useless even if they know about it. Who can stop us from joining forces with the Holy Church? The chairman is right. Someone immediately agreed. The prestigious King of Swords immediately expressed his opinion. The speaker is right. If the Light Church joins forces with us, the military will not be able to withstand a single blow. As for the Inquisition and the Hall of Knights, they're just paper tigers. In the past, they were only able to gain a foothold with the military and the Light Church. Now that the Light Church has fallen, they can only surrender. Well said. Everyone was excited and happy. Dean saw that everyone was in high spirits, so he explained his plan. He also set up a precaution against the interference of the inner wall. Everyone was in awe as they saw that Dean was so thoughtful. After all, it wasn't as simple as they thought. Once the outer wall was unified, then the biggest problem they would face would be the inner wall. However, no one dared to speak out their worries. It would be tantamount to pouring cold water on them and offend Dean. He was a person who dared to kill the Night King. It wouldn't be worthwhile if they provoked him and got killed. However, this worry slowly disappeared after listening to Dean's plan. Great Chairman's considerations are truly comprehensive. An elder said with a soft sigh, full of admiration. I've seen the Chairman's strategy and talent when I was in the 9th region. It's really admirable. Hawkeye, who was sitting in the seat of the 9th region, complimented. Dean waved his hand. If everyone remembers, then the meeting is over. Everyone got up and left one after another. Chapter 639. At this moment, most of the people in the hall had dispersed. Sword King was about to leave when he heard Dean's words. He couldn't help but be startled. He turned around and looked at the black-haired boy sitting above. His eyes flashed slightly, and he smiled naturally. It's his blessing that Mr. Speaker has taken a fancy to him. This subordinate is very happy to offer him to Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Sword King turned to the attendant behind him. Black Crow, since the speaker thinks highly of you, then follow the speaker. Don't lose my face. Do you understand? Black Crow nodded. Yes. He turned to Dean. Black Crow is willing to follow the speaker. Dean nodded slightly. He waited for Sword King and the rest of the elders to leave the hall. Then he turned to Felon Cox. Patriarch Felon, I'll have to trouble you to deal with the military affairs. I'll promote you after this matter is over. In the beginning, Pluto had evil intentions. He was not satisfied with the position of deputy speaker. He wanted to assassinate me. Now that he is dead, the position of deputy speaker is still empty. As a result, many things of the Dark Church need to be handled by me personally. Sometimes I can't split myself into two. Felix was startled. Her heart was beating wildly. She suppressed the excitement in her heart and respectfully bowed. Speaker, Felix family will do our best to complete your command. Dean nodded. You can go now. Yes. Felix nodded respectfully. Dean glanced at Black Crow after Felix left. Richelieu gave you a good code name. Crow is the fastest type of messenger bird. It has a good meaning. Black Crow's body shook. He slowly looked up at Dean. Black Crow doesn't understand the speaker's words. Please enlighten me. Didn't I say in the meeting earlier? The Pope was kidnapped by me. He confessed everything, Mr. Riley. Black Crow's face slightly changed. He was silent for a moment. He looked directly into Dean's eyes. So, are you going to kill me? If I wanted to kill you, why would I waste time talking to you? Dean indifferently said, Richelieu has abandoned you. Your life should be over, but I'm willing to give you another life. Be loyal to me. How about it? Riley's eyes moved as he stared at him. I'm willing. Very good. Dean smiled and gently clapped his hands. Sergei, who was acting as an attendant, turned to the back of the hall. All of you come out. After a moment, a group of footsteps sounded. Behind Sergei was a group of people dressed in silk and satin. There were men and women, young and old. They were wearing silk and satin clothes that were commonly worn by nobles. However, they couldn't hide the dark brown scars on their faces, arms, and necks. Riley's face changed as he saw these people. His figure flashed as he rushed forward to support a middle-aged man. He looked at the ugly scars on the middle-aged man's arms and neck. Riley's eyes reddened as his body trembled. He turned to look at Dean. Kill me if you want to kill. Why torture my people? Dean didn't speak. The middle-aged man who was being supported by Riley quickly said, Riley, don't talk nonsense. We are alive thanks to this Lord. He is our great benefactor. Riley looked at him and then at Dean. He knew that he had made a slip of the tongue. He bowed to Dean and said, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. Black Crow has offended you. Black Crow deserves to die. I hope you can be magnanimous and forgive Black Crow's people. They are innocent. Dean raised his hand to stop Riley's words. I never hurt people who are loyal to me. I won't hurt innocent people either. You don't have to worry about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Riley was grateful as he bowed his head. Child, it's great to see that you are okay. The middle-aged man looked at Riley. He reached out to cover Riley's face. Riley looked at him in a daze, his eyes red. Father, how did you get hurt? Who hurt you? I don't know. The middle-aged man shook his head and sighed. We have to thank this Lord. If it wasn't for him, we would have suffered more. Riley nodded. Suddenly he thought of something. He glanced at the crowd behind him. His face changed. Mother. The middle-aged man slightly opened his mouth, but stopped. His face was ugly as he bowed his head. Dean slowly said in an apologetic tone, I'm sorry, we were late. Your mother is dead. As if struck by lightning, Riley was dumbfounded. The middle-aged man bowed. He is right. Your mother. She couldn't bear it and passed away. Riley felt his body wobbling. He took a few steps back, tripped over the leg of the chair, and sat down on an elder's chair. But at this moment, he didn't feel anything and just sat there in a daze. Dean looked at him and turned to the middle-aged man. You guys have a good chat. I'll go first. The middle-aged man said in awe, Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dean took Aisha's hand and left. Sergei followed behind. Riley's eyes gradually recovered after Dean and others left. He immediately stood up and rushed towards his father. He stared at his father. Father, did he send people to harm you and pretend to rescue you? The middle-aged man frowned. It shouldn't be, right? Riley immediately asked, When were you killed? On the 15th of last month. It's been a month since then. The middle-aged man replied. Riley was a bit surprised and then said with relief, Looks like it's not him. How do you know? He knows my identity. He got it from the Pope. He has been holding the Pope for a few days. Riley narrowed his eyes, and a cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. Someone else did this to you. I will find out who the murderer is. The middle-aged man nodded. He has captured a person and is interrogating him for us. There should be news soon. Really? Riley was startled. It was noon. Everyone in the streets and pubs of the outer wall and civilian areas were talking about the change of Pope. Everyone was curious about the origin of the new Pope. They didn't care much about the reason for the change of Pope. First, they didn't think too much about it. Second, even if they thought about it, they knew that they wouldn't be able to know the reason with their own ability. Everyone wanted to know who would be the next Pope. Would it be the cardinal that they were familiar with? Or would it be someone hidden by the Holy Church? I heard that the new Pope is very young. He must be a genius. Is it God's instruction for him to be the Pope at such a young age? Why doesn't God of light care for me? I don't want to be the Pope. I want to be a knight of light. You believe in women. God of light didn't purify you. You scum. Amidst the chatter in the tavern, a clear voice suddenly said, as far as I know, this new pope is a once-in-a-century genius of the light curia. He showed extraordinary talent before he was 10 years old and received the God of light's instruction to enter his dreams. Since then, he has been secretly protected by the light curia and is being groomed as the successor of the pope. It is said that he is not only proficient in poetry and music, but also excellent in swordsmanship. He has been secretly taught swordsmanship by the great Light King since he was young. The rest of the people couldn't help but look at the speaker. A strong man with a red face asked in a rough voice, "Who are you? How do you know about this?" The man raised his head and took a sip of wine. He laughed and said, "You haven't seen the special report of the Luminous Church, right? It's all written there. And today, I saw Master Antonia's new poem. The whole poem is full of praise for the new pope. Tell me, if he is not a virtuous person, why would Master Antonia praise him like this? You know, Master Antonia is famous for his arrogance. He never flatters anyone. He once wrote a poem to scold a general in the military." Hearing his words, the others were a little surprised and looked at each other. The strong man stared at him with his bell-like eyes and said, "Have you read the newspaper of the Holy Church? Are you from the Holy Church?" The man said proudly, "Although I'm not, I have a friend who is. I heard it from him. This matter has already caused a sensation in the Holy Church." Everyone came to a sudden realization and couldn't help but feel surprised. Awesome. I didn't expect a master like Antonia to write a poem to praise the new pope. I remember that when the previous pope succeeded, Master Antonia didn't write a poem to praise him, right? Bullsh asterisk T. When the previous pope Richelieu succeeded, Master Antonia was still wearing diapers. Ha ha ha. Who is this Master Antonia you were talking about? You are illiterate. You don't even know Master Antonia? You read the poem for nothing. You said that he is illiterate. How can an illiterate read a poem? The tavern resumed its chaotic state of conversation. The person who spoke earlier took out money to pay the bill as he drank. Then he left the tavern quietly and walked towards the end of the street before entering another tavern. After leaving the Filin family, Dudian suddenly thought of an oversight. He said to Sergei, "Go and inform Hawkeye. Let him do something." Sergei whispered in Sergei's ear. Sergei was startled after listening to Dudian's order. Yes. Barton and other apprentice knights were on duty on the hill next to the Utopia Mountain. Suddenly, more than a dozen horses galloped up from the foot of the hill. All of them were excellent breeds of white wolf horses. They were extremely fast and had sharp teeth. They were the exclusive mounts of regular Knights of Light. There were silver-armored figures sitting on the back of the horses. In front of these regular Knights of Light, there was a figure wearing a bright red robe. It was like a strong flame blooming in the snow. It was full of sacred feeling. Barton and others were stunned as they saw the blood-red robe. They couldn't help but rub their eyes. Yes, it was the clothes of a cardinal. A cardinal had come here. Everyone was stunned, but they quickly regained their senses. They suppressed their excitement and straightened their backs, standing ramrod straight. Elnarin rode to the front of the hill. He saw a familiar face in the crowd, according to the portrait. There was a trace of jealousy in the depths of his eyes, but he knew that he couldn't do anything about it. He dismounted and came in front of the man. He slightly bowed and said, "Are you Mr. Barton?" Barton was stunned. The other apprentice knights were also dumbfounded. Their eyes were wide open and their chins were about to fall to the ground. "Mr. Barton? Cardinal? How could he call him that?" Barton was so nervous that he stuttered, "Yes, it's me." Seeing this reaction, Elnarin sighed in his heart again. He thought to himself that in the entire Radiant Church, there were so many people who were better than Richelieu that they could line up outside the Golden Wall. He really couldn't understand why Richelieu would choose such a useless person. He still maintained his politeness and said, "Mr. Barton, are you free? Please come with us." Barton was stunned. He suddenly thought of what Dean had said before. His heart jumped. Was it not a joke? "Yes, I'm free," he quickly replied. "Please come with me." Elnarin immediately turned back to the horse. Barton followed behind him in a daze. The other apprentice knights wanted to poke their eyes out when they saw this scene. This dull boy from a noble family was actually appreciated by the cardinal. It was simply unbearable. They knew that from now on, they would lose a free laundryman. Moreover, they would have to look up to this person. Elnarin saw Barton's silly look. He pointed to an empty horse and said, "Mr. Barton, please get on the horse." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly remembered that an apprentice knight couldn't tame a snow wolf horse. He was about to step forward when he saw Barton grab the horse's hair and jump onto the horse. The snow wolf horse looked up to the sky and roared twice. It wanted to throw off the person on its back, but Barton was holding the horse's rope tightly. It didn't take a moment for the snow wolf horse to calm down. Elnarin's eyes lit up as he saw this. He turned around and got on his horse. "Mr. Barton, please come with me." "Yes." Barton nodded honestly. Following the winding mountain path, Elnarin and Barton soon arrived at the top of Mount Uddo. They dismounted and walked past St. Mark's Square. It was the first time for Barton to come here. He felt very small as he looked at the huge white square. His heart was full of nervousness, but there was also a trace of fear in his heart. Dean had told him that he would become the new pope in 7 days. Barton only needed to succeed the pope, and he didn't need to worry about anything else. Dean would take care of everything. Now it seemed that the words that were more than a joke had come true. It was like a dream had come true. Is this a dream? Is this not a dream? Barton squeezed his fingers so hard that his fingernails dug deep into his skin. The pain made him feel incredibly steady and excited, but he was more afraid than anything else. In his mind, the Pope was supreme, and he was a nobody. Could he really become the Pope? Would the others agree? Would they laugh at him? Would he be able to manage the Holy Church after he became the Pope? How would he manage it? These thoughts repeatedly passed through his mind. If Elnarin knew what he was thinking at the moment, he would be speechless. Then he would say one word: ignorant. Barton didn't know that the status and significance of the Pope was far beyond his imagination. If someone knew the real situation, they would never believe that an apprentice knight with no background and no merit could become the Pope. However, reality was moving in an inconceivable direction. Even Elnarin, who was leading the way for Barton, felt that he could not see things clearly. He could not believe that the other 7 cardinals would agree to such an inconceivable thing. The reason why he agreed was that the order was passed down by Richelieu. He was Richelieu's confidant, so he couldn't refuse. But the others weren't the same. But after the meeting began, the votes were completely different from what he had imagined. Everyone agreed to it. Chapter 640. 3 hours before the bishop's voting meeting. Rosa angrily crushed the secret letter in his hand and smashed it on the ground. The secret letter had been sent by Richelieu through a secret channel. The seal and handwriting on it were all written by Richelieu himself. However, the contents of the letter made him furious. This old thing actually wanted him to fully support the new pope? How could a mere apprentice knight be worthy of being pope? Was Richelieu out of his mind? He wished he could find Richelieu right now and question him to his face. However, what made him even angrier was that he could not see Richelieu right now. Furthermore, such an important piece of news had been announced to the public without him knowing. This way, even if he joined forces with the other bishops to oppose this matter, the Vatican would still be humiliated. After all, this was a matter as important as the succession of the Pope. If they were to repeatedly reverse it, not only would the people talk about it, they would also become a laughingstock. However, now that things had come to this, he could not care less. Contact the other bishops immediately. I suspect there's something fishy about this. Before we meet the Pope, we cannot elect a new Pope so easily. Rosa's eyes were dark as he said to the butler beside him. The butler looked at his gloomy expression and did not dare to say anything else. He nodded and agreed softly. I don't believe that the other bishops will tolerate a nameless brat as Pope. Rosa thought to himself. As one of the 8 cardinals, he was already in his early 70s. In terms of seniority, he could be considered one of the most senior bishops. He had thought that when Richelieu abdicated, He would be one of the strongest contenders. But now, all his hopes had been buried. In order to wait for the day of Richelieu's abdication, he had secretly planted his chess pieces for the past 20 years, preparing for that moment to come. However, this moment had come too quickly and caught him off guard. Furthermore, it had skipped the voting round and swept him out of the race. He could not swallow this anger. After 20 years of careful planning, he was now faced with a situation where he would lose everything. "Old man, what are you planning?" "Damn it!" Rosa clenched his fist and hammered it on the table, causing a crack to appear on the wooden table. Just then, footsteps came from outside the door again. Rosa turned his head and saw that the butler who had retreated earlier had returned. A flash of anger flashed across his face as he scolded. "Why are you back? Hurry up and go. If you miss the time, I'll have your head." "Ayaya." A mocking voice came from behind the butler. In the next moment, the butler's body fell to the ground. He was dead. Rosa's pupils shrank as he looked at the black-robed figure behind the butler. His expression changed slightly as he said, "Dark Church? How dare you come here? Are you here to die?" Although he said that, his palm quietly moved to his back and touched the warning wire under the table. After all, the fact that the latter was able to barge into his ancient castle and act so fearlessly meant that he most likely didn't come with good intentions. The black-robed man smiled and said, "Let me introduce myself first. I am an elder of the 5th District. You guys have given me a pretty good title, Ghost. I quite like it." Rosa said with a cold expression, "I recognize you. You were lucky enough to escape the Battle of Crimson Castle 8 years ago. To think that you would dare to appear before me today. You're quite bold. That time I was bullied by you. Today I want to experience what it feels like to be bullied by numbers." The black-robed man smiled and clapped his hands. Suddenly, the sound of the wind surged from several broken glass windows in the room. With several bangs, the glass windows were smashed, and a few figures jumped in and landed in the room. They formed a triangle and surrounded Rosa. Rosa's expression changed slightly. His finger hooked under the table, but found that the hidden wire was loose. It meant that the wire had been cut short. His expression was ugly. He didn't expect that the other party would unknowingly infiltrate his heavily guarded home. This could only mean that there must be pawns of the Dark Church lurking around him. Otherwise, it was impossible for these people to appear here without a sound. "You want to assassinate me with just a few of you? You're too naive." Rosa's eyes were gloomy. He didn't act rashly. Instead, he was stalling for time. He hoped that his confidants and the knights stationed around the castle would be aware of the situation here. "If you really want to fight, my people will immediately rush over. Since you have walked into the trap, don't even think about leaving." Although he knew that he was at a disadvantage, but he couldn't lose his momentum. The black-robed man chuckled. "Bishop, we came to find you, not to kill you." "Huh?" Rosa's eyes slightly moved, but his heart was still vigilant. The black-robed man leisurely said, "My lord sent me to communicate with you. I presume you have heard about the succession of the Pope. My lord hopes that you can fully support the new Pope." Rosa's expression changed. These words were too familiar. He had just read the contents of a secret letter, and this was the meaning behind it. Could it be, "Your lord? You are Richelieu's man?" Rosa's eyes were gloomy as he looked at the black-robed man. No, no, no. The black-robed man shook his head. "Richelieu has pledged allegiance to my lord. So as his subordinates, I hope that you can cooperate with him." Rosa was startled. "His Highness the Pope will pledge allegiance to your lord? Who is your lord?" "You wouldn't know, but my lord is a big shot from the inner wall." The black-robed man smiled. He didn't know much about Dean. He deliberately said that Dean was from the inner wall in order to deter Rosa. After all, Dean had given him the task of asking Bishop Rosa to support the new pope. The word invite was very particular, so it was up to him how he wanted to invite. Inner wall. Rosa was shocked. He felt the pressure in his heart. There was a great possibility that the person who was able to kidnap Richelieu was from the inner wall. After all, Richelieu's strength wasn't simple. At least as far as Rosa knew, the old man's strength was above the Light King. "Bishop Rosa, have you thought about it?" The black-robed man wasn't in a hurry. Rosa stared at him for a moment, then gritted his teeth. The new pope is a member of your dark church. Letting him take the throne is tantamount to handing over the holy church to you dark believers. Don't even think about it. I won't agree even if I die. Then die. The black-robed man shrugged and waved his hand. Whoosh, whoosh. The surrounding figures suddenly leaped up and pounced towards Rosa. Rosa was shocked, but he didn't panic. He retreated and hit the glass window behind him. Puff! A cold light suddenly pierced through the window at an incredible speed. Rosa turned pale with fright. He did not expect that there would be another person hiding outside the window without making a sound. Although his perception was not strong, it was not so weak that he could not detect someone at such a close distance. This could only mean that the other party was a terrifying assassin who was extremely good at hiding. The sharp blade pierced through his back, and pain instantly spread throughout his body. Rosa growled in pain and struck out with a backhand palm. With a bang, the withered old palm struck the black shadow outside the window. The black shadow let out a muffled groan, and his body flew out of the window, falling more than 10 meters down the stairs. Just as he was about to fall, he quickly grabbed the wall with his palm. There seemed to be a suction force in his palm, and he actually stuck to the wall like a spider. On the other side, when Rosa repelled the ambushers behind him, his body was obstructed, and he was immediately surrounded by several people around him. He glared angrily, and with a low growl, he slapped at one of the slender figures, trying to find a way to break through. This slender figure held a soft sword in her hand. As she moved, it was like countless silver snake heads swaying, pouncing towards Rosa's face. Rosa was unarmed and didn't dare to face the attack. He immediately retracted his hand. At the same time, he felt his strength rapidly draining. The pain in his back spread to his whole body in a short moment. He was just about to change his hand to defend when the pain surged to his arm. In an instant, like a cramp, his body stiffened. In this brief moment of stalemate, the pincer attack instantly hit Rosa. With a loud bang, Rosa's body flew out like a rag bag, smashing into the wall of the room. The huge oil painting hanging on the wall was also shaken off, and the dust fell on Rosa's face and hair, making him look extremely wretched. Rosa struggled to get up from the ground. His chest surged up, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, splattering it on the expensive carpet. His face was red, and he looked up at the approaching black-robed man and the others. He was so angry that his beard and hair stood on end, but he couldn't exert any strength. He could only lie on the ground, trembling. "You're a human. Why do you have to fight with your life?" The black-robed man said with a smile. Rosa's eyes were about to split open as he stared at him. "If you want to kill me, then kill me." Pooey. He spat out a mouthful of blood, splattering it on the black-robed man's face. The surrounding people immediately drew their weapons and prepared to attack. The black-robed man immediately stopped them and then raised his hand to slowly wipe the blood off his face. He ordered, "Go get a pen and paper." The person beside him immediately fetched it from the desk and handed it to him. Seeing this, Rosa immediately knew what they were going to do. He said angrily, "Even if I die, I won't let you do as you please. Don't even think about touching the Vatican." The black-robed man kicked his arm, and with a crack, his arm was instantly broken. He screamed in pain, but his body was still numb. Clearly, the blade that attacked earlier was highly toxic. "Cut off this arm," the black-robed man ordered. "Yes." The person beside him immediately drew his sword. Before Rosa could react, he felt a chill on his arm. His arm had been cut off. The black-robed man picked up the severed arm and said softly, "Even if you didn't come to the banquet, it's the same as sending your will. Lord Bishop, I'll send you to the embrace of your light god." Rosa glared angrily and cursed. The black-robed man turned around and slightly raised his hand. "Poo-pee-you." The sound of flesh being pierced rang out. Rosa, who was lying on the ground, had 4 swords stabbed into his body, nailing his body to the luxurious carpet. Blood flowed along the sharp blades. Carly was one of the 2 females among the 8 cardinals. She was 38 years old this year, and to be able to become a cardinal at this age was extremely impressive. She was the youngest among all the cardinals. Of course, this also had to do with the help of her family. After all, her grandfather was the fourth pope. Madam Carly, have you finished writing? On the sofa in the study sat a short old man. He carried a broadsword on his back and was wrapped in black cloth. In other places in the study stood 4 figures in black robes. Their auras were grave and stern, like 4 ghosts. At the feet of the short old man, there were 2 corpses. One had its head cut off, and the other had its chest pierced through. The wound was extremely large. Many nobles recognized these 2 people. They were the personal attendants of Cardinal Carly. Although they were only attendants, in the eyes of many nobles they were still important figures. In front of the desk, Carly's hair was disheveled, and she sat on the chair with an ugly expression. She held a pen and struggled to write down the short old man's words. There was a bright red palm print on her beautiful cheek, and it was the short old man's hand. In the hands of the famous Sword King of the Dark Church, she had no power to fight back and could only obey. After a moment, Carly finally finished writing the letter. The pressure on her body seemed to have been lifted. She bit her lips. She knew that doing this meant that she had betrayed her faith, betrayed the Dark Church, and betrayed the great God of Light. But if she didn't do this, not only would she die, she would also implicate her family. She only hoped that the other cardinals could escape this calamity. As long as there was opposition, this puppet pope controlled by the Dark Church would not be able to ascend. Let me see. The Sword King stretched out his hand. Carly picked up the written letter and slowly handed it to him. The Sword King glanced at it. His eyes narrowed and smiled. The handwriting is very beautiful. Then he put away the letter. Carly's face was ugly. I have done as you said. Don't hurt the innocent. Innocent? The Sword King looked up at her. When you killed my followers, didn't you think that they were also innocent? It's just that their preferences are a little different from yours. Carly knew that she was not qualified to reason with him. She gritted her teeth and bowed her head, not saying a word. Now, we still need you to come with us. The King of Swords stood up, patted the invisible dust off his body, and said, How can there not be a bishop to support the new pope's ascension? At that time, you will also be able to see the Pope Richelieu that you have always been thinking about. He will give you an answer. I hope you won't be stupid. I can kill you at any time. Carly clenched her hands, her nails digging deep into her palms. She knew that she had no choice but to see Richelieu. There seemed to be a glimmer of hope. In another castle, Rados was sweating profusely. He quickly wrote the letter and handed it to the black-robed man in front of him. He squeezed out a smile and said, Do you think this is okay? The black-robed man glanced at the letter and put it away. He looked up at him mockingly and said, I didn't expect that there would be such a weak existence among the cardinals. If the other cardinals were like you, it would save us a lot of trouble. Rados smiled and said, You are right. What else do you need me to cooperate with? Just say it. Come with us. The black-robed man was too lazy to say more. He snorted and turned to walk outside. He lifted his feet and stepped over the several bleeding corpses on the ground. 2 hours after the end of the voting meeting, Barton followed Elnarin through St. Mark's Square and arrived in front of the Pope's Basilica. Barton looked up at the magnificent basilica, his face full of shock. It was the first time he had seen such a magnificent building. A solemn and sacred aura hit him in the face, making him feel deep veneration. All the distracting thoughts were instantly thrown to the back of his mind, and his heart was filled with devotion. Come in. Elnarin led the way. Chapter 641. These people were dressed in luxurious clothes and stood in 2 rows. Their expressions were respectful and pious, as if they were praying for the commoners. The fluorescent stones taken from the bodies of the monsters emitted a holy and gentle radiance that illuminated the hall, as well as their bodies, faces, and even their eyelashes. In the gentle radiance, they exuded a solemn and holy aura. On the high steps behind these people stood a figure with a crown on his head and a scepter in his hand. He was an old man dressed in a gorgeous robe that looked like the stars and the moon. He had an elegant temperament and a gentle expression, but the white hair on his temples and his slightly sunken eyes made him look a little haggard. Barton's eyes widened as he saw the old man. He couldn't move his feet. Pope. Barton looked up at the old man. His heart was full of shock and indescribable awe. He didn't think that he would be able to see the great Pope with his own eyes. Richelieu looked down at the trembling boy, his eyes slightly narrowed. Although the latter was not handsome and did not have the slightest bit of outstanding qualities, he was surprised that he could get the trust of the suspicious Dean. The people in the 2 rows on the left and right turned to look at the young man. Their gazes were obscure and sharp, sizing him up. They wanted to see what was so special about him that he could become the new pope. However, after looking at him for a moment, everyone realized that he was just an ordinary apprentice knight. His appearance alone did not have any temperament at all. It must be known that most of the time, people did not know what was inside of them. They would often speculate about one's character and character through one's temperament and appearance. However, the appearance and temperament of this young man really could not match the identity of a pope. This was the first time Barton was being stared at by so many people. He felt his heartbeat quicken, as if there was a mountain pressing down on his body, making it hard for him to breathe. It was as if even the dark spots of radiation hidden under his clothes were exposed to the air, making him feel completely insecure. He was so nervous that his entire body was drenched in cold sweat, but he was too embarrassed to show it. He could only endure it and slowly walk into the hall under Elnarin's lead. Richelieu stared at Barton quietly. When Barton walked closer, a smile slowly appeared on his gentle face. "Mr. Barton, tomorrow is the day you will inherit the throne and become the new pope. Are you ready?" Barton's heart jumped as he heard Richelieu's words. He stammered, "Pope, aye." Seeing his reaction, the people in the 2 rows beside him frowned slightly, but they all consciously lowered their heads and didn't show their displeasure. Richelieu raised his hand slightly and stopped him from speaking. He said softly, "You don't have to be nervous. When I was the Pope, I was just as nervous as you are. I couldn't even sleep for an entire night." At this point, he smiled lightly. The tense atmosphere in the hall immediately eased. The rest of the people looked at each other, thinking that it was true. If it were them, they would probably be trembling with nervousness and excitement. Barton saw his gentle demeanor and immediately felt a sense of familiarity. He nodded vigorously and said, "I understand." Richelieu smiled and said, "Tomorrow, when you are inaugurating the Pope, you will need to recite the Holy Bible. You will have to prepare for this tonight. In addition, there will be many nobles and military leaders coming to watch the ceremony. Don't make a mistake during the ceremony. Do you understand?" Barton was shocked. "I have to read the Holy Bible?" He did not know many words, and most of them have been adapted in recent years. The Holy Bible was written earlier, so it was written in ancient characters. He might not be able to read them all. Wouldn't it be awkward if he did not know how to read halfway? Richelieu's eyes flashed. "Don't worry. You only need to choose one of them to read. You don't have to read the whole thing. I will send someone to guide you tonight." Barton heaved a sigh of relief. He was about to say that was great, but he felt that it was too casual. "Thank you, Your Highness. The ceremony will be held tonight. Familiarize yourself with it first," Richelieu said gently. He then turned to the 2 rows of people next to him and said, "For the inauguration ceremony tomorrow, everyone, do not make any mistakes. All the documents must be prepared. There is no room for sloppiness in this matter, understand?" As he said this, his expression became extremely stern. He did not have the slightest bit of gentleness toward Barton. "Yes," everyone replied in unison. Elnarin also responded, but he sighed in his heart. He knew that it was a done deal, and there was nothing he could do to change it. However, this was not the worst thing that could happen to him. He guessed that the other bishops had agreed to it, because this kid was at least better than Richelieu being the Pope. When Richelieu's foundation was not stable, he could be a mere figurehead. He could even plunder a lot of resources for his own use. This was something that Richelieu could not do when he was the Pope. Secondly, this kid was too ordinary. Even if he received the resources of the church in the future, he would not be able to achieve much in a short period of time. The chances of replacing him in the future were much higher than replacing Richelieu. From these aspects, this was a great advantage. Thinking of this, he felt relieved. He suddenly felt that this kid was much more pleasing to the eye. The night passed in the blink of an eye. The Light Church's St. Mark's Square carried out the rehearsal for the ceremony the entire night. Barton had participated in it several times, and after familiarizing himself with it, he began to read the light scriptures under the guidance of someone arranged by Richelieu. The rest of the Knights of Light, and the Priests of Light were still rehearsing it over and over again. Only when there were no mistakes did the grand rehearsal end. The light of dawn shone down from Mount Utopia. Although it was early in the morning, the foot of the mountain was already very lively. Groups of carriages came slowly, with the flags of various nobles on the carriages. There were also carriages from the military, as well as carriages from the Court of Judges and the Hall of Knights. The pedestrians who had come to watch the grand ceremony saw the carriages passing by and were excited, pointing and whispering. Dong! Dong! The holy bell rang, and the echo spread throughout Mount Utopia. The grand ceremony began in St. Mark's Square. On this square that had endured for more than 200 years, the statues of the previous popes were huge and towering, overlooking the densely packed figures in the square. With the sound of poetry and music, Barton and Richelieu entered and ascended the highest altar. Barton had never seen so many people before. As far as the eye could see, all he could see were black heads and cheers. He was so nervous that his back was covered in cold sweat. Richelieu sensed his nervousness and guided him slowly through the ceremony. After a while, as the succession ceremony ended, Richelieu retreated from the altar, leaving Barton alone to recite the light scriptures. Chapter 642. Dean's eyes gradually focused as he noticed Richelieu's arrival. He looked up at Richelieu. How is the ceremony going? It's in progress. There won't be any mistakes. Don't worry, Elder. Richelieu bowed his head in a humble tone. He had put down his identity and was respectful towards Dean. Dean nodded slightly. Let him read the speech we prepared in advance after the ceremony is over. I will. Richelieu nodded. Dean slowly retracted his eyes and looked at the ground. His thoughts drifted away again. Richelieu peeked at Dean. He saw that there was nothing else for him to do, so he slowly retreated. When the sun gradually became brighter, the ceremony also came to an end. Barton stood alone on the altar, facing the gazes coming from all directions. Although he was nervous, all his attention was focused on the Bible in his hands, so he didn't seem so awkward. The Bible was very thick, but when he opened it, there was another layer of paper. On it were the new words that Teacher Guillou had translated from the ancient language of the Bible last night. He had read it through twice last night without missing a word. At this moment, although he was a little nervous, he did not make any mistakes. No one knew that at such a solemn moment, the person who was devoutly reading the universal love psalms on the stage was thinking about not making any mistakes. A moment later, Barton finally finished reading the Bible. Barton heaved a sigh of relief and closed the Bible. Only then did he feel that his hands were a little stiff and strenuous. He raised his head and looked forward. Suddenly, he saw countless black heads and the gazes of the distinguished people in the front row. These gazes seemed to be able to see through everything and see through all of his secrets. At this time, Richelieu led two old men in white robes onto the stage. Both of them were holding a tray with the Pope's scepter and the Holy Crown. Richelieu's face was solemn, and his steps were steady as he approached Barton step by step. It was the first time for Barton to see such a serious pope. He was nervous and didn't know what to do. Richelieu looked at the timidity and awkwardness in the boy's eyes. There was a burst of melancholy and sadness in his heart. Although this matter was carried out under Dean's plan, he never thought that the person who would replace him as the new pope would be such a young boy. He felt somewhat ashamed of the previous popes and the mountain that he once cherished. After a moment of silence, when the preaching bell rang, Richelieu came to his senses. He put away the distracting thoughts in his mind and followed the ritual. As he recited the eulogy and exhortations, he handed the scepter and crown that had accompanied him for many years to Barton. Barton was originally wearing a white hat that covered his black hair. When Richelieu crowned him, he did not take off the white hat. Instead, he put it on. Although people with ulterior motives would find this scene strange, most people had not seen the grand occasion of the coronation of the Pope, nor did they know the traditions of the luminous church, so they did not pay much attention to it. In the blink of an eye, Barton had donned the luxurious and noble robe of the Pope, as well as the crown that represented holiness and truth. He held the scepter that the God of light had bestowed upon him as he stood on the high altar. Although his eyes were filled with nervousness and unease, his dignified appearance and temperament had already been revealed. A tsunami of cheers erupted from the square, spreading like waves. Barton's heart gradually sprouted confidence as he saw the cheers. It was an unprecedented experience. Amidst the cheers, Richelieu handed the scroll in his hand to Barton and said in a low voice, "You are now the new pope. According to the rules, you have to state your views on the future of the luminous church, as well as attack the cult of shadows. After you have finished, you should express your blessings." Barton was startled for a moment and immediately put it away. When the cheers ended, Barton coughed lightly and summoned his courage. He opened the scroll and roughly scanned it. After knowing the general content, he immediately read it from the beginning. Countless people in the square listened attentively. This was the main purpose of their visit today. "I declare that from today onwards, the asylum tax of the Holy Church will be reduced by half. From today onwards, all poor towns and villages can apply to the Holy Church for poverty alleviation." Barton's voice was rough as he tried to spread his words as far as possible. The second point, from today onwards, for the next 5 years, all criminals who disrupt the governance of the Holy Church and slight the Holy Church will be pardoned. There was a thunderous cheer from the audience. The military general sitting in the front row, the head of the branch of the magistrate, and the legendary knight of the Hall of Knights were stunned. This first grace was too generous. How much money would be lost if the asylum tax was reduced by half? It was at least equal to the entire annual income of a consortium. As for the second point, it was within their expectations. Most of the popes who succeeded the throne would carry out a series of pardons to show tolerance. The third point is to restore the identity of the legendary genius Dean from the Temple of Elements. Master Dean was framed by the Dark Church. After a detailed investigation, Master Dean's innocence has been found. His identity will be restored. Barton was excited as he read until here. He was worried about Dean when he was banned. He didn't expect that the ban would be lifted. The fourth point, the poverty alleviation program will be launched. In the blink of an eye, Barton read out 6 points in one breath. He put away the scroll. The square was filled with thunderous applause and cheers. In particular, the rich merchants and commoners who had gathered at the outer edge of the square felt excited from the bottom of their hearts. Among the 6 benefits, besides the exemption of the asylum tax, there were also many other taxes. It should be known that these heavy taxes had always been a huge burden on them. Now that they had been relieved by more than half, how could they not be excited and cheer? Richelieu silently watched from the side. There was a complex look in his eyes. He didn't know what Dean was thinking. He thought that Dean would take this opportunity to increase taxes and squeeze the people clean. He didn't expect that Dean would do the opposite. Not only did he not squeeze the civilians, but he gave them more opportunities and more help. He didn't know whether it was good or bad for the Holy Church to fall into the hands of the little devil Dean. He was ashamed that he wasn't as good as the sinister little devil in this regard. It seemed that he wasn't as qualified as Dean to be the Pope. Shame. Sergei was relieved as he heard Barton's announcement. He respectfully said to Dean, "Master, your identity has finally been restored. You don't have to hide anymore." Chapter 643. Inner Wall, a side hall of the monastery. Elder, An urgent letter has been sent from the outer wall. A middle-aged man dressed in a pure white Taoist robe said respectfully in a low voice. At the same time, he presented the black letter with both hands. Stewart, who was dealing with several documents, frowned as he raised his hand to take the letter. The middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and handed the letter to him. Opening the black letter, Stewart quickly scanned through it. His aged eyes narrowed slightly as a cold glint flashed across them. That old bastard Richelieu actually dared to pass on the position of Pope without permission? He has been the Pope for so many years. Does he think that his wings are hard? Elder, I think there is a reason for this. The middle-aged man bowed his head. Stewart's eyebrows twitched. The 5 supervisors didn't send any news back? How can they not know about such a big thing? Or have they already been killed? The middle-aged man bowed his head even deeper. I think so too. Stewart slowly raised his head and looked into the distance. He was kneading the secret letter in his hand. The person who can quietly kill the 5 supervisors and control Richelieu is at least a master who is at the level of a pioneer. What is the reaction of the other forces? Can you speculate which force has secretly intervened in the outer wall? This subordinate is still investigating this point, the middle-aged man said in a low voice. Stewart stared at the middle-aged man for a moment. He slowly moved his eyes away. Let Delphine take Francis to the outer wall to investigate. Although this is a barbarian land eroded by radiation, but it is an important part of our strategic deployment. We can't let others easily plunder it. Not to mention, we have to cut off his hand. Yes. The middle-aged man bowed his head in response. The name of the new Pope Barton was published in major newspapers after the ceremony. It spread to all corners of the outer wall, except for the underground miners in the slums and the adventurers who went out to the radiation zone. Almost everyone knew about his name. Accompanied by Richelieu, Barton nervously dealt with the important figures sent by the various factions. Then he was brought by Richelieu to the Holy Radiant Basilica where the Pope resided, which was also where Richelieu used to live. As soon as he entered the Holy Radiant Palace, Barton saw a familiar figure sitting on a throne before he even had the time to marvel at the magnificence of this resting palace. However, although the latter's face was familiar, the temperament he exuded was completely different from the kind youth in his memory. Nevertheless, he didn't think too much about it as he excitedly ran over. "Dean, I really became the Pope." "Presumptuous." Sergei, who was standing next to Dean, shouted. "How did you address my young master?" Dean slightly raised his hand to indicate that it didn't matter. Barton was startled for a moment, but he reacted. The strong joy and excitement in his heart suddenly sobered up. He suddenly remembered that this scene was expected by Dean 7 days ago. In other words, all of this was arranged by him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a deep awe in his heart. He had seen the shocking scene of countless people looking up at him. He clearly knew how noble and great the position he was sitting in was. But such a great position seemed insignificant in front of Dean. "Master." Barton bowed his head and called out the same way he did when he was training at the Ryan family. "You and I are friends. You don't have to be like this." Dean waved his hand. Barton wasn't an ignorant kid anymore. He shook his head. "Master, it's my honor that you are willing to let me be your brother. If it wasn't for you, then there wouldn't be me today. You will always be my loyal master." He bowed his head and saluted. Dean got up and held Barton's arm. "You will always be my brother. It's my honor that you are willing to believe in me." Barton's eyes were wet as he looked at Dean's sincere eyes. Sergei couldn't help but secretly shake his head as he saw Dean's abnormal appearance. "Hypocrite, shameless," Dean said. "Today I came to find you mainly to protect you." "Protect me?" Barton was startled. He suddenly felt nervous in his heart. Richelieu's eyes lit up as he silently looked at Barton. Dean stared at him. "You should know the truth of equivalence between effort and gain. To be honest, I've thought for a long time about letting you sit in this position. It's not easy to be the Pope. You have to face assassinations from the Dark Believers and other forces. Mr. Richelieu should be very clear about this point. Don't you think so?" Richelieu looked at Sergei and then looked at Barton. Yes, honor and sacrifice coexist. You have to be ready to sacrifice at any time to get this honor. Barton was a bit nervous as he heard Dean's words. He was too embarrassed to show it. However, he couldn't hide his thoughts due to his experience. Dean stared at him. Mr. Richelieu is right. If you want to wear the crown, you have to bear its weight. Are you afraid? Barton looked at Dean's deep eyes. He felt a trace of courage in his chest. He gritted his teeth. I'm not afraid. Dean patted his shoulder. Well, you don't have to worry about me. I'm here to protect you. No one can hurt you unless I die. Barton was touched. Don't say that. I'm the one who will die. You gave me my life. If I sacrifice myself for you, then at least I'll repay the kindness. Repay kindness. Dean silently muttered these two words in his heart. At the same time, he expressed his gratitude to one person. It was Aunt Di from the Maischen orphanage. Aunt Di was the one who taught the idea of repaying kindness to the orphans. Send an order to the Temple of Elements. Tell them that you have invited me to come over to discuss about the invention so that I can live here and protect you in the future. Dean said. Barton nodded. Richelieu secretly sighed. He knew that Dean was going to extend his fingers to the core institution of the Holy Church, the Temple of Elements. That night, the business district was ablaze with lights. All the taverns and streets, as well as families eating, were talking about the change of the Pope. The 6 reforms announced by Barton were especially discussed by many squires, nobles, and wealthy merchants. The young ladies and nobles were more curious about Barton's age, appearance, and other information. The new pope is indeed as great as Master Antonius sang. From today onwards, our lives will at least be twice as rich. Yes, the Holy Church is much stronger than the military. Every year there is a war and they ask for money. The military is just a fart. They're the ones who pull the nobles into a fight. How disgusting. Chill. Keep your voice down. If the military finds out, then they will put you in the dungeon. You're right. Let's talk about the new pope. I heard that a legendary knight of the Hall of Knights has publicly praised the new pope's greatness. I heard that this new pope is still very young. TSK. He has such talent and glory at such a young age. He is even more terrifying than the legendary genius Dean. They're all young heroes. That's right. I thought that the genius in theurgy was already a rare figure in 100 years. I didn't expect the new pope to be the same. But why haven't I heard any news about him before? What do you know? The Holy Church must have trained him to be the next pope. How could they expose him so easily? Yes, if the Dark Church knew that such a character would be the next pope, then they would send people to assassinate him every day. Brother, you're the one who sees through everything. You flatter me. Everyone, let's toast to this great new pope. Cheers. Chapter 644. Barton's tax reduction treaty made the outer wall fall into a sea of cheers. In this era of clear class system, the tax burden was far more than the imagination of ordinary people. At this moment, no one would protest against the fact that the new pope succeeded the throne. However, the military and the Knights' Hall were an exception. What does the Holy Church want to do this time? Tax reduction? Do they want to use this method to gather people's hearts? The 3 commanders-in-chief were sitting in the conference room of the military headquarters. Many generals and staff were sitting in the hall. Some were worried, some were deep, and some were lost in thought. According to the latest intelligence, I've found the identity of this new pope. If I tell you, you'll probably think that I'm joking. A bearded 5-star general looked around at the crowd with a hint of mockery and coldness on his face. Don't keep me guessing, just say it. What identity? The bearded general indifferently said, The kid called Barton isn't a noble. He hasn't been crowned with a knight medal. In fact, he is an orphan from the slums. I have found the orphanage where he came from and verified his identity. What? What are you talking about? He is from the slums. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the bearded general in disbelief. This reaction was completely within the expectations of the bearded general. When he first received the news, His reaction was exactly the same as theirs. However, at this moment, he only felt a trace of ridicule in his heart. He did not think that his peers were ridiculous, but he thought that the luminous Curia's actions were ridiculous. They actually allowed a lowly commoner to become the Pope. No one would believe this. He is an orphan from the slums. How can he join the Holy Church? A female general frowned. The bearded general shrugged slightly. Didn't the luminous Vatican change their recruitment rules a few years ago? As long as you're from a noble family, you can skip the examination and enter the apprenticeship stage. Before he entered the Vatican, he was adopted by a desolate noble. As for why this desolate noble adopted such a lowly person, no one knows. Didn't you ask? I can't ask a dead person. They are dead. By the time my men arrived, they had already been dead for a long time. Their entire family was killed, and even their children were not spared. Not a single person was left alive, including their distant relatives who came to visit them. Unfortunately, they were also killed, the bearded general said indifferently. Another general, who was as burly as a bear, had a gloomy expression on his face as he said in a low voice. In that case, they were silenced. It looks like all of this was a meticulously prepared plan. What kind of conspiracy is the Vatican up to? Why would Richelieu support a peasant from the slums to succeed the throne? Isn't he afraid of blasphemy? It's not the first or second day that the Light Church has blasphemed God. They use the name of God to educate the commoners and extort their wealth. How despicable! The female general from before said coldly. I don't agree with you. Another blonde general said in an unhappy tone, although the Vatican has gone too far in some places. But the outer wall wouldn't be so peaceful if the Vatican didn't spread the energy of justice for so many years. The plague and poverty would bring riots. The Vatican has pacified the emotions of the commoners. This is something that we soldiers can never do. We can't point spears at everyone and tell them not to fight or they will be punished. The female general sneered. Are you sure that the people who spread the energy of justice are the righteous people? We didn't use the spears to frighten the commoners. Do you think there would be riots if there wasn't a knight of light patrolling the area? That's nonsense, the blonde general angrily said. Who said that the people who spread the energy of justice must be the righteous people? Even if the Pope's purpose is out of interest, at least the things he does have a good impact on the people. That's enough. Enough. An 80-year-old commander raised his hand to stop the quarrel between the two. The contribution of the Holy Church is undeniable. But the Holy Church has become more and more unscrupulous over the years. Behind any power, there is the word interest. The Holy Church is no exception. We have suffered losses in the hands of the Holy Church. If the Holy Church continues to expand, then the nobles and civilians will fall to their side. At that time, we can only look up to the Holy Church as the security of the outer wall. Your words are too serious. Another white-haired elder beside him smiled calmly. What can the commoners do? Even if they all become believers of the church, what can they do? Do they dare to overturn the heavens? Why not? I don't think we can underestimate the power of the commoners. Although they are weak, but their numbers are huge. If they gather together, then they may become a force that can shake us. The previous commander-in-chief said in a deep voice. You are worrying too much. The white-haired old man chuckled. Let's not say that the commoners won't dare to do so. Even if they listen to the words of the Vatican, they will only be digging their own grave. Do you think that the Iron Lion Crusaders will be afraid of these unarmed civilians? Sooner or later, they will suffer a big loss. The old man said in an angry tone. I agree. A general echoed. The white-haired old man glanced at him and indifferently said, instead of caring about these lowly civilians, it's better to talk about the Holy Church. This time they're going to elect a new pope. I'm most worried about the inner wall behind the Holy Church. If they're guided by the inner wall, then this matter will be troublesome. Hearing his words, everyone looked at each other, and their faces darkened. Commander, if the Vatican is interfering with the inner wall, then should we apply to the garrison of the inner wall to send reinforcements? The previous female general asked. The white-haired old man sneered. Nothing has happened yet. Do you want to set off a war in the inner wall? The old man who was sitting next to him was silent. He didn't agree nor refuse. There was a trace of disappointment in the female general's eyes as she heard his words. She sighed in her heart. She knew that the military always hated to ask for reinforcements from the inner wall. Even the last time, when the barbarians invaded the border and broke through the fortress, the military didn't ask for reinforcements from the inner wall. The reason for this was that many generals were opposed to asking for reinforcements. They knew that once the inner wall sent reinforcements, they would face the possibility of being reshuffled, especially the three commanders-in-chief. They would face the possibility of being ruled by the Vatican. They would no longer be supreme. I think we should use our eyes to investigate the details of the situation. Let's see what the Vatican is going to do. The previous bearded general opened his mouth and broke the deadlock. Someone immediately seconded the idea. While the military was having a meeting, an angry roar shook the walls of the Hall of Knights conference hall. Bori, are you a spy sent by the Holy Church? Who allowed you to represent the entire Knights Hall to support the Holy Church? Do you want to drag the Knights Hall into the muddy water? The one who spoke was a white-haired old man. He was the Lord of the Knights Hall, Vic Jones. Everyone coldly looked at the skinny old man. They were waiting for his explanation. Bori smiled bitterly. He knew this would happen when he used his identity as a legendary knight to commend the new pope. He silently thought about his words and said, "My lord, I'm not representing the entire Hall of Knights. I'm only representing myself. I've seen the new pope's resume, and I think he's a good man. He'll be an outstanding pope in the future. That's why I'm commending him." Chapter 645. Beau Rouet replied in a hurry, "Lord, it's not that serious. Besides, even if the inner wall takes action, we can take the initiative to show our goodwill. What's the harm? Stupid. Do you think that the military and the magistrate wouldn't take action if the Holy Church is behind the inner wall?" Victor Jones looked at him angrily. They have big forces in the inner wall behind them. Although the Knights Hall is famous in the outer wall, but our foundation in the inner wall is shallow. We can't compare with them at all. Once they heat up the war in the inner wall through the outer wall, we will be the first to suffer. Beau Rouet was stunned. The other elders were surprised. They had never heard him talk about such a secret before. Victor looked at Beau Rouet's reaction and didn't hide anymore. The Knights Hall has been making friends with all parties for so many years. We have the love of the nobles in the outer wall and the respect of the Holy Church. Even the military doesn't dare to look down on us. On the surface, it seems that we are very strong and we are the faith of all the knights. But why haven't we actively developed our forces for so many years? It's not because we believe in the rules that we shouldn't fight with people for no reason. It's because our foundation isn't as strong as theirs. Beau Rouet's face slightly changed as he heard Victor's words. He didn't think that there would be such a secret. What he didn't expect was that it wasn't the rules that they respected and believed in, but the most tacky and straightforward things. They weren't strong enough. The next day, Dean returned to the Temple of Elements. His appearance aroused countless onlookers and cheers. The Temple of Elements was the most excited when Barton succeeded as the Pope. Since Dean was arrested on charges of colluding with dark believers, the overall atmosphere of the Temple of Elements had been in a depressed state. Their image in the outside world had declined a lot. Even if there was a gag rule, the mages would talk about this matter in private. After all, they couldn't forget this person. No matter what kind of invention, they couldn't help but talk about this person, especially the wood and lightning mages. After Dean left, they had been studying the principles of wood and lightning rods that Dean had left behind. The name Dean had become a monumental monument that couldn't be bypassed on the path of a mage. Although air magic was banned, there were still many mages who were interested in air magic and secretly studied it in their castles. After all, this was a completely different world, and its charm was unparalleled. "Master Do, Master Dean, Teacher, Teacher." Dean heard a different name in the shouts of support. He looked at the source of the voice and saw a small figure desperately squeezing in the crowd. His mouth kept calling teacher, but the voice was drowned out by the crowd. If it was not for his amazing hearing, he would not have noticed it. Dudian remembered that he was a student of the inner wall. His name was Edward. Teacher. Edward squeezed forward with all his might, afraid that he would miss this opportunity. Dudian walked towards Edward. The crowd quickly separated, revealing Edward, who was desperately trying to squeeze out. Teacher. Edward looked at Dudian, who was close to him. He was so excited that he almost shed tears. His face was flushed. Dudian saw his expression and knew that it wasn't just tears of joy. He asked, "Did I suffer grievances after I left?" Tears rolled down from Edward's eyes. He didn't expect that Dudian's first words would directly hit his heart. He felt that all the grievances and pain were nothing at this moment. He raised his hand to wipe the tears that rolled down from his cheeks. "No, teacher, I didn't suffer grievances." Dudian quietly looked at him, but didn't ask further. "From now on, you won't suffer grievances anymore. You can consider the grievances I suffered when I left as a growth experience." "Yes, teacher." Edward nodded. There was a trace of determination in his wet eyes. Dudian patted his shoulder. "Follow me." "Yes, teacher," Edward firmly replied. Dudian held Aisha's hand as they slowly walked along the Temple of Elements. They passed by a building and went down the mountain. They didn't go to meet the masters in the castle. Edward followed Dudian to get into the carriage. Dudian and Aisha sat in the carriage. Edward sat next to Dudian. Dudian asked about his life during this period of time. Dean listened quietly. It was almost the same as what he thought. Because of his bad reputation when he was arrested, the child became a laughingstock for everyone, especially the people who lived with him. They made fun of him every day. Even if he wanted to close the door to study his experiments, he was just a junior mage. He was forced to live in the same room with other people. He didn't have a separate castle. Moreover, he had to apply for the resources to produce the inventions. He met a lot of obstacles. His life was extremely bitter and sullen. No one was willing to teach him new knowledge. After all, his identity as a teacher was too sensitive. Dean looked at the scenery outside the carriage and quietly looked into the distance. Edward followed Dudian's gaze. His thoughts drifted away as he passed by the mountains and buildings. He suddenly felt that there was no difficulty that could not be overcome. The world was very big, and he had to rely on his own efforts to control his own destiny. Dudian took Edward to the holy temple where Barton lived. At the same time, he asked Sergei to move some of his luggage. The luggage was nothing more than experimental materials that he needed. The holy temple was very big, and Dudian occupied most of the area. Dudian sent Edward to live in the side hall outside the mountain. Barton shared a room with Dudian, but stayed in the square during the day. He practiced the swordsmanship that Dudian had taught him. Riley was the swordsmanship genius that Dudian had brought with him. With the help of the elder of the Dark Church's animal glue mask, no one recognized the person who guided the new pope to practice swordsmanship. He was Riley, the swordsmanship genius of the Holy Church. In the blink of an eye, Dudian had moved to the Holy Temple for 3 days. Whoosh! Dudian came to the bedside after finishing the experiment. He lit a cigarette and inhaled. He gently exhaled the smoke as he looked out of the window. He could vaguely see the outline of the sighing wall in the direction of the inner wall. "Master, why do you and Mr. Richelieu like to smoke this cigarette? Is it good?" Barton asked curiously as he saw Dudian standing by the bed. Chapter 646. Barton was startled when he heard Dean's words. There was an inexplicable throbbing in his heart. He looked at his partner who used to eat in the same broken cafeteria. He suddenly found that Dean had become somewhat strange. He didn't have the vitality of an 18-year-old teenager. He was like a piece of frozen ice that couldn't be eroded or warmed up. He thought of the days they had experienced together. There was a kind of sadness in his heart. He reluctantly smiled. Since it hurts the lungs, it's better not to smoke. Dean gently took a puff and slowly exhaled. The smoke curled up. He was silent. Barton stared at him and said in a low voice, "Young master, you've been alone all this time. It must have been very hard for you. But now that we're standing at the top and have obtained what countless people dream of, no one will be able to hurt us anymore. There is no such thing as obtaining. I have been losing, and it will continue until the end of my life." Dean muttered to himself. Barton felt sad, but he didn't know where this sadness came from. He didn't understand why Dean would say such words. He didn't know why Dean would be so depressed. It was as if there was an invisible gap in front of them. It was as if there were two worlds. The world where Dean was standing was so close, but it was as if he could never reach it. He fell into silence. He didn't know what to say. After a long time, he thought of something. His eyes lit up, and he immediately said, "Master, let's pick up Joseph. He is alone in the military without anyone to take care of him. It should be very difficult for him." Dean's blurred eyes gradually became clear. He gently pinched the cigarette butt and flicked it out of the window. He turned his back to Barton. "Joseph has his task. He will come back to us soon." Barton slightly opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he held back. St. Mark's Square was as bright as day. The stone pillars on all sides were hung high with street lamps. The stone pillars were embedded with fluorescent stones. The ground of the square was illuminated. Dean opened the wooden box. There was a piece of fresh meat dripping with blood. The strong, fishy smell made Aisha slightly agitated. The corner of her mouth slightly opened, as if saliva was secreting. Dean took out the knife next to him, cut a small piece of meat with a fork, and passed it to her mouth. Aisha's body slightly trembled, but she didn't immediately open her mouth to eat. Dean's eyes were gentle as he gently shook the bell on his wrist. The bell issued a short and regular jingle. After hearing this sound, Aisha immediately opened her mouth and bit the meat on the fork. Her white and flat teeth had now become somewhat sharp. She gobbled up the meat, and the excess blood overflowed from the corner of her mouth. She looked slightly ferocious. Dean slowly cut off another piece of flesh and gently brought it to her mouth. One piece after another, Aisha quickly chewed and swallowed. Dean poured a glass of cold water and handed it to her. He let her open her mouth and drink it. After these days of getting along, he had basically grasped the type of food Aisha ate. Her main food was raw meat. The fresher the better. As for the type of meat, it didn't matter. Just like the piece of meat in front of him, it was a piece of beef. If she was fed roasted meat, she would definitely have diarrhea afterward. Moreover, because the instruction hadn't trained her to this stage, she would often poop it out unconsciously when she had diarrhea and dirty her clothes. In addition, Dean would also give her water to drink. In his concept, even if Aisha was a corpse, her body still needed to replenish water. However, she couldn't drink hot water. Otherwise, there would be bubbles in her body. Although it wouldn't have any impact on her combat effectiveness and actions, it would make her appearance change greatly. She would become hideous and ugly. Dean found that although she didn't need to drink water and wasn't hungry for water, but if she didn't drink water, her skin would become dry and cold. After a moment, a piece of fresh beef was eaten. Dean gently patted Aisha's back so that she wouldn't choke. Although he knew that she wouldn't choke, he still couldn't help but do so. "Take a break. We'll take a bath later," Dean whispered to her. Aisha was silent. Her red lips were stained with blood. She looked like a cold vampire. Dean held her hand and looked at her tenderly. This time of the day was the most relaxing time for him, so he couldn't help but talk more. "I'll find a way to save you after I rule the inner wall. They must have a way in this area. After you recover, I'll take you to a faraway place to live. I'll take you to my hometown. I'll take you to see the scenery of my hometown. I'll take you to see the sea. We'll live by the sea and slowly grow old," Dean said softly. Suddenly, Aisha's mouth slightly moved. There was a trace of light in her pure black eyes. Seeing this scene, Dean was slightly startled, and then an unbelievable thought came to his mind. Could it be that she could hear his words, and her consciousness had recovered? He couldn't help but tremble with excitement. His eyes were moist. But soon the beautiful fantasy was broken. Aisha suddenly stood up and flew out like a sharp sword. She disappeared in front of Dean's eyes. Dean was stunned for a moment. He turned his head and saw Aisha jump into the back of the temple. There was a bottomless cliff there. His pupils constricted, and he quickly chased after them. In his urgency, he automatically activated his thermal vision, and the world in front of him immediately changed. He saw two heat sources hidden under the window of the cliff, and they were climbing up. Sneak attack? Dudian was startled. The excitement and fantasy that had just emerged in his heart were suddenly shattered. It was as if cold water had been poured over his head. His eyes flashed a trace of cold, killing intent and anger. His skin was faintly visible. Boom! A loud noise suddenly came. It seemed to shake the entire Utopia mountain. Dean rushed to the window. He was about to go down when he felt a sense of danger. He quickly jumped back. He saw the window was broken. Two figures flew into the temple. It was Aisha and another graceful woman in a black robe. Under the contrast of the pitch-black robe, the woman's exposed arms were as white as jade, as smooth and exquisite as porcelain. Aisha immediately stabilized herself after landing. She turned and rushed toward the woman in a black robe. The black-robed woman's hood that covered her face had long been lifted. After rolling to the ground, she was just about to stand up when she saw Aisha rushing head-on. Her complexion suddenly changed, and she hurriedly retreated. Her fingers quickly touched her waist, and a black soft whip was suddenly thrown from her wrist, lashing towards Aisha, who was rushing head-on. Aisha didn't flinch in the face of this fierce blow. Instead, she raised her hand and grabbed the flying black whip with her slender palm. She used her elbow to pull the black whip in her direction. At the same time, she rushed to the front of the black-robed woman. Her originally beautiful and indifferent expression suddenly revealed a ferocious expression. She opened her bloody mouth and pounced towards the black-robed woman. The woman in a black robe was pale. She hurriedly raised her hand to resist, but her strength was like soft cotton. Puff! Aisha hugged her body and bit her throat. Her neck was instantly bitten through. Flesh and blood splashed all over her face. But Aisha didn't care. She was still madly biting desperately. The woman's screams resounded through the hall and soon died down. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.